Our story today begins with the voice of the heroine, who wonders if everything would have been different if she had not been born. The man answered her, asking a counter question. If she had not been born, but had died back then, would he have been able to remain just an unhappy man who had lost his wife and daughter? The sword trembled in his hands. He said that now they both had turned into monsters and asked if she was happy. Was she happy? The girl wondered. And raising her head, she told her father that she didn't know what it meant to be happy. And not only that, she doesn't know any emotions at all. A wedding with a man she's never seen. Rumors of infidelity, imprisonment in a dungeon on suspicion of murdering her husband's mistress. She dealt with all of this, but she felt that there was no reason for her to be punished for a crime she didn't commit. She wanted to live, so she ran away. She wanted to survive, so she killed her pursuers. And from then on, everyone began to call her a terrible witch, Rachel's killer. The father said that she herself was to blame for what was happening to her. It was retribution for her sins, and he suggested putting an end to it. An old sick man, this man could not defeat her. She wondered if it was a man who created memories. The old man was breathing heavily, but he was clutching the sword tightly in his hands. And the next moment, he rushed with the sword at his daughter. And she kept thinking, or do memories shape a person? He called her a monster? Does that mean that she really became one? She was so tired of everything. And if you think about it, dying at the hands of a father who hates her isn't so bad. A very fitting end without all the extra stuff. It was the year 548, according to the imperial calendar. And on that day, her eyes closed forever. At least that's what she thought, because she opened her eyes again in a brightly lit room and realized that she was alive. Her father was not the type to heal her wounds and put her to bed. She got up and wondered what had happened. Suddenly, she shuddered as she passed by the mirror. She clearly remembered that it had broken when she was about 17 years old, and her childish face had been reflected in it. And while the girl was gathering her miles, trying to believe what was happening, the maid suddenly called her and asked, crying, if she had woken up. Rachel immediately recognized the girl in front of her. She was her personal servant, Betsy. The maid told her mistress in tears that she had fallen down the stairs, and she was very scared for her. When the girl with red hair said that she too had grown younger, the maid asked what she was saying. Adjusting her bangs, she told Betsy that she was not joking. Yes, that was a pity, she thought. But she was not joking and asked Betsy how old she was now. She shuddered and answered 16. Then she asked how old she was. The maid replied that she had turned 15 a few days ago and asked what was wrong with her. Rachel said she had one more question and asked what year it was. It was 533 on the imperial calendar, which meant she had gone back in time. She told her that she hit her head when she fell down the stairs, so she doesn't remember anything. I didn't think that she would believe it so easily. And now, at the same time, Betsy was giving her a tour of the palace. 10 minutes ago, she asked to be shown the house, and now she was walking and looking at the walls of the corridor, thinking how gullible she was. Betsy happily showed her mistress the office and told her that there was a gallery on that side, which she sometimes went to. Rachel had forgotten that she had been there often until she moved out of her parents' house. It is possible that she always wanted to look at more than just ordinary and typical paintings, and specifically looking at the portrait of her mother, she wondered how this was possible if she did not experience emotions. Suddenly, a guy approached the deputies, and Rachel was immediately overcome by some familiar feeling. This man, she killed him. He asked what she was doing there, and the girl thought about what she should answer, and said that she just wanted to look at her mother's portrait. Hearing the answer, Logan shuddered and immediately turned away, telling her to leave, saying that it would be better for her not to catch her father's eye. The maid breathed a sigh of relief and said that she was very excited when she saw Mr. Logan. She remembered that Logan Chloe didn't like her. He was the one who pointed the sword at her only brother. Once, as a child, he pointed his finger at her and even said that she killed her mother. That she was not his sister, yes, that happened too. She wondered if he had also come to look at his mother's portrait, meaning that even such a cold person could miss those who had died. All day long, she thought about why this happened to me, why she had to live through this. There are many people in the world who would like to turn back time, regretting their past. She had never wanted anything like that, and it was strange. Would I really just have to live this life again? The girl thought. How boring and unpleasant, Rachel thought, until the next day a new problem arose. Because the next morning, before dawn, her personal maid presented her with a sealed envelope. She took it, and looking at it in surprise, asked Betsy what it was. The girl answered the lady that it was an invitation. Rachel said that she already understood this, and then she said, "Although you did not often, you regularly attended social events, because there is no mistress in the Marquise's family. Count Robert. If you think about it, that's true. He and Logan divided social events between themselves. It's just that she recently returned to the past and she doesn't really want to go out into society, but there's nothing she can do. It's her duty." The girl asked to listen, and Betsy said this thoughtfully and somewhat puzzled. But the next moment she ran away and said that no, she didn't want anything. After that, her personal maid continued to behave strangely, constantly looking away and sadly looking at her mistress when she was not looking. But this quickly got on Rachel's nerves, and at one point she called out to Betsy and asked sharply if she was hiding something from her. The girl again began to look away, looking for an excuse to escape, and then the green-eyed Marquise told her to speak. She would not be angry. The maid said, worried and anxious, that her memory was not normal at the moment, and asked if perhaps it would be better for her to rest for a while. Rachel said she could rest easy when she had heard everything, and then Betsy reminded her that after her 15th birthday, the Marquise had performed her engagement ceremony. When she heard these words, the first thought that came into the girl's head was that it was exactly at that time. Her maid, looking sadly at the floor and with sadness in her voice, said that how could they arrange an engagement without meeting him personally? His name is Tyler Roderick. That's why she didn't really care. But looking at Betsy's upset face, she realized that the troubles had been piling up for years and had finally led her to this end. Tyler Roderick, the man I was engaged to at 15 and married at 18, I never even met before the wedding. If she had expressed her displeasure about the engagement, or at least become friends with Tyler, maybe something would have changed. Thinking about the past, the girl with red hair looked away, looking at the floor, and thought that everything was for the best. She said that there was nothing special about it. Many people enter into marriages of convenience. She should have prepared her better for the ball and pushed the maid out of the room. Great! She kicked Betsy out. Now we need a bookshelf above the table, 5th from the right. That's where she hid her diary when she was 14. Blood of magical origin, method of application, writing with blood. She read and thought that she began to write it when she first learned to control magic. And since she went back to the past, changes could have occurred. She cut her finger and printed blood on the page, thought about what name to give him, and remembering how coldly many people treated her, she decided that the ideal name would be Ice. Rachel's magic could change the properties of objects, so the book became cold, and she thought she needed to put it back before anyone noticed. It would be more accurate to say that magic partially endowed the object with some kind of feature, but such magic could not last long. And so Rachel's personal maid was doing her makeup, preparing her for the ball, when suddenly there was a knock on the door. "Who could it be?" Betsy asked. But the next moment, Mr. Logan entered the room and begged to be excused. His sister was almost completely ready to go out. From her hair to her makeup, she asked what happened. Her brother said that he had heard that Count Robert had sent her an invitation, but he had personal reasons for being there and asked her to give the invitation back. This angered and outraged the red-haired girl, and she thought that it would have been better if he had come before she started getting ready and asked what these reasons were. The brother awkwardly said that he couldn't tell her that. The sister replied, "Okay," but she didn't want to give up the invitation. Then Betsy reminded the Marquises that they could go there together, after all. They were brother and sister. And yet they listened to the advice and instructions of the maid and arrived at the invited ball together. Rachel thought how annoying it was. But they went into the hall, and now they could walk separately. Her brother didn't even look in her direction. Thinking that she could take a walk since she had nothing to do here anyway, the girl went out into the yard. Suddenly, she witnessed a very interesting scene that took place near the pond. One lady pushed another into the pond. "Wow," Rachel said out loud in surprise and thought, "it seems she has witnessed a murder." She approached the place where the assassination attempt was committed, thinking that many people had seen her go out into the garden, so she could well become a suspect. The next moment, she bit her finger and squatted down, lowered it into the water and said, "Water, your name is air. The source of magic is blood." She changes the property of the object. She recently returned to the past and does not want to be called a murderer anymore. And so she, having cast a spell, jumped into the water and looking around, said that it was already very deep. Finding the drowning girl with her eyes, she swam up to her and grabbed her hand, asking if everything was okay with her, but realized that she had already lost consciousness. She wasn't going to save her, she could easily kill her, and just as easily save her. It wasn't a problem for her. But still, the strength of a 15-year-old girl is not enough, but she needs to rise a little more, Rachel thought. Already being almost at the surface of the water, she began to choke herself because the magic stopped working. True, 5 years ago, her magic was completely different, and her dress got tangled. Could this really be the end? The girl thought. But the next moment, a hand reached into the surface of the water, grabbed the girl by the wrist, and pulled her out of the lake. After sitting Rachel down, who was trying to clear her throat, the man squatted down next to her and asked if she was okay. She answered yes. "What a relief," said the yellow-eyed blonde, smiling happily, that he had saved her. She had saved Cecilia. "Which Cecilia?" the green-eyed marquise asked, and the young man explained that that was the name of the girl she had saved. It was not by chance that Cecilia Richard asked Rachel the stranger. He answered everything correctly, and then the girl remembered everything. This is the same one who will marry Logan in a few years. It seems they even got married for love, which is very unusual. And then her older brother Logan appeared. As soon as she remembered him in passing, she was so scared when she met Logan's gaze and realized that it turned out that he, too, could have more than just a rude expression on his face. The new yellow-eyed blonde acquaintance noticed how the face of his friend's savior changed, and then smiling, he asked the lady if she knew Logan. She, without hiding it at all, answered that she knew he was her brother. For a moment the blonde thought and even tensed up, but then a smile shone on his face again. He said, "By the way, I didn't even ask your name. Can you tell me your name?" She replied that her name is Rachel Chloe. "Nice to meet you," said the new acquaintance with a sweet smile, and said that his name was Arthur Robert. The girl's green eyes opened wide, and she asked him if he was a magician by any chance. The guy said to wait, and a greenish light poured out of his hands. Now she was sure that this was definitely Arthur Robert. He was a famous magician, only in a completely different sense. If she was a terrible witch, whom the whole world hated, then Arthur was the best magician, whom everyone adored. She had never heard any negative gossip about him. Wow, how different magicians can be. These were the thoughts that were in her head. And so, having examined her dress after using magic, she realized that all the clothes were dry, and having thanked him, she said that she had heard about him. Well, it was time for her to go and advise the guy to dry his clothes, and Lady Cecilia, Arthur asked to wait. But suddenly, their dialogue was interrupted by Cecilia Richard herself. She thanked them for saving her, and introduced herself. Taking Rachel by the hands, she said that next time she would formally invite her to their estate, and again thanked the brave girl. The green-eyed girl thought about what to say in such cases when she met the gaze of her stunned brother. And even though this was the first time this had happened to her, it wasn't such a bad feeling. "There's no reason to," she said, looking away. That same evening, while putting her mistress to bed, the maid said that she had had a hard time that day and asked her to rest. Suddenly, someone knocked on the bedroom door, and Betsy asked who it could be at such an hour. Afterwards, she told the lady that she shouldn't open the door looking like that. But it was too late. Rachel had already come out and asked what happened. Her brother was shocked, and putting his hand on his forehead, he looked up and apologized for coming so late, and said that he wanted to thank her. The red-haired girl was dumbfounded with surprise, not understanding why, and especially not why her brother should thank her. He exhaled heavily and looked into her eyes, and said that he wanted to thank her for saving Miss Cecilia. Standing on the threshold, Rachel asked her brother, not understanding why he was thanking her, but the young man could not give a clear answer. Then she asked if he was already engaged to Cecilia. Maybe they were officially dating, or if he had confessed his feelings. But the answer to all the questions was the same. No. In a word, there is nothing between you. It is unrequited love, which means he has no reason to thank her, she concluded. The young man rubbed his forehead again and asked her to accept his apology. Rachel again did not understand what he was apologizing for. And Logan said, "I was on my way to see Miss Cecilia that time, so I couldn't pay attention to her. She was his sister. He shouldn't have neglected her and run off after another lady." Rachel said he didn't have to worry about that. She didn't know what a real family was, but she had heard about it in general terms. But isn't spiritual communication and pleasant memories of each other important in a real family? She asked. The Marquis and Logan had a good relationship, the girl recalled. He was proud of his son and heir, but there was none of that between them, and therefore she could not be considered family. The girl told her brother that they had nothing in common except blood relationship. They rarely saw each other and had never even had a heart-to-heart talk. Therefore, there are no positive emotions in her, rather the opposite. And, to put it simply, she asked if they were even a family. After saying this, she slammed the door right in front of her older brother, who was still in shock from what he had heard. And going inside her own room, she saw the maid nearby and asked what had happened to her. Tears formed in Betsy's eyes, and her face was already red. She was so sad and offended for her mistress. And so the next day a new invitation came from the estate of Count Richard. Rachel asked if she had to go. "Of course," Betsy answered. This is the first time she is invited for personal reasons. It was a great excuse to make friends, but she didn't need them. So the maid said that everyone needs friends, especially she. She said that she didn't care, the girl said. But the maid had already armed herself with cosmetics and sat her mistress down on the pouf. She asked him not to talk like that she should expand her social circles a little, and she got down to work, but Rachel still didn't understand why. As a result, she arrived, and from the doorway, the maid greeted Lady Rachel at Count Richard's estate. The green-eyed girl greeted her, and the maid escorted her to a table in the yard, and asked her to wait a little, saying that the mistress would come soon. Our red-haired heroine wanted to answer that everything was fine, but her gaze fell on the desserts, and she was quicker. Not much time passed, and 3 people approached her. Cecilia smiled and said, "Welcome to Lady Rachel." When Arthur turned to her and said that they had not seen each other since Miss Cecilia fell into the water, she said hello. The Countess thanked the girl for coming and said that she wanted to introduce herself properly and gave her full name. In response, she said that her name was Rachel Chloe. Lady Cecilia. The girl with silver hair asked to call her simply by her first name. She pointed to her twin brother and introduced him as Nathan Richard. And then the young man introduced himself. He also said that Lady Rachel could just call him Nathan when his sister nudged him with her elbow, and then apologized for his rudeness. What is this? The Marquise thought then. Is this the relationship with people that Betsy had told her about? And after that, they sat down at the table. Having found out how old his new acquaintance was, Arthur said that they were all 18 and had been friends since childhood. Watching and observing their conversations, the green-eyed girl realized that there really was nothing special in the word friends. The conversations continued. The guys suddenly remembered what Arthur was like before, and Rachel felt uncomfortable and drank tea. Afterwards, she asked Cecilia if she had invited her, because she wanted to ask something, like who had pushed her into the water. The girl with blue eyes said in surprise that she had already guessed, and asked if she had seen who did it. Rachel thought about it, and straining all her brain, said, "It was dark there. She couldn't see the face. The man had red or brown hair and was wearing a dress. She came up behind her, pushed her, and quickly ran away. But you can think of too many people who could fit that description," everyone agreed. The girl asked Cecilia why she was there, and she answered that someone had given her a note. She thought that one of her friends had called her, so she went there. Arthur asked if her father could look for the criminal. Cecilia replied that she didn't want to cause trouble for her parents, especially since the criminal could escape if the adults intervened. The friend told the girl that it was dangerous to act as bait. She replied that he and Nathan were with her, and continued her thoughts. Rachel thought about why she was here. They were seeing each other for the second time in their lives, and standing up, she said that since she had told everything she knew, it was time for her to go. Cecilia apologized for them getting carried away in their own conversations. She wanted to talk to her better. She admitted that it was not she who invited her, but Arthur, and the guy said that in addition to the problems with the criminal, he just wanted to see her. Rachel made a face and asked if she was with him, and the guy, smiling brightly, replied that he was very interested in her as a person. She? Asked the red-haired girl. And also as a person. It seemed that she wanted to add the question of whether he was in his right mind. But she refrained from asking additional questions. But the yellow-eyed blonde, on the contrary, asked her if she was a magician. He based his guess on her small frame and the fact that she was able to pull Cecilia out of the water while she was unconscious. He reminded her that she was even heavier in her wet dress, and Rachel asked Arthur if he thought she had used magic. To be honest, he replied, she had seen Mr. Logan run to Cecilia that day, but she had remained too calm. Turning to his friend, he explained that at that moment he left his sister and rushed to her. Rachel thought that Logan would have to put in a lot of effort, but she asked irritably what was wrong with that, and Arthur answered smiling that it seemed she was not entirely aware of the peculiarities of magicians. Here Nathan intervened in the conversation, saying that magicians are respected among the aristocrats. It is unclear why she hides her abilities. It's not like they said. Firstly, she knows a little about magicians, Rachel said, and thought that she just knows how to use it. Magicians are rare and special people. If they appear at social events, they immediately become the center of attention, and asked if she hadn't noticed that day how everyone was discussing Arthur. Rachel asked if she should say that she didn't notice, that she just wasn't interested. Cecilia replied that it seemed that way to her, because she was also a magician. Rachel asked tensely and coldly how the two were connected, and then Arthur said that usually magicians are born. But suddenly he noticed the maid who had come with Rachel, and then the Marchioness said that it seemed it was time for her to go. "It's a pity," said Cecilia. "Come visit any time. You are always welcome," and offered to walk her home, but Ray refused. Then Arthur said that he would follow her, no matter what. She was also a young magician, which meant that he had to befriend her, because that was one of their duties. And now the guy was already running up to the girl's carriage, asking to wait. Betsy asked who this gentleman was. Having learned the answer, she said in surprise that he was the heir of Duke Robert. He was a magician, and very famous, capable, and even handsome. "Okay, let's go, Betsy," Rachel said to the maid the next moment, starting to climb onto the boat. Arthur asked her to wait. He wanted to say something and tell her what she wanted to know. The girl asked the maid to wait for her a little. Moving away, she told the guy to speak. Arthur said that if you know who the magicians are, you will be able to recognize them at first sight. He asked her if she ever felt different from others, like not being able to understand others, and the girl said she felt that way right now. On more fundamental matters, the boy said, admitting that everyone was crying or angry and she didn't care. Rachel replied that she had always been like that. Smiling, he explained that this is the peculiarity of magicians. They have enormous power, but in return, they are deprived of emotions. However, they can be learned to show them, and humanity is acquired. Ray asked Arthur if he was like that too. Of course he was, he replied, and it was only when he was about 12 that he began to understand emotions a little. Usually, such young magicians are assigned a more experienced one who teaches them to recognize emotions. The girl said that she does not need a teacher. She thanked him coldly for telling her, but she would have been fine with it, on the contrary, if she had had feelings. She wouldn't be able to stand being rejected. The blonde's eyes widened. "Maybe we should do it this way," the guy suggested. "If she doesn't want to study with a teacher, they can just become friends." "Friends?" Rachel asked the young man in surprise. "But why should she be friends with him?" Scratching his cheek, Arthur asked if she wanted to ask why she should be friends with him, and explained that friends are people who are always happy to see each other and share their feelings and experiences. The guy said that she would be able to experience different emotions, and this would help her cope with life's difficulties. But a couple of days later, Betsy once again told the lady that she had received another letter and asked if she had finally made friends. Rachel angrily and even irritably accepted the letter and said that she had no friends. The maid asked her not to be shy. She got involved with annoying people, she thought after reading. She should have left everything as it was, so that she would have drowned then. She remembered him telling her that since she didn't need a teacher, they could just be friends. That friends are people who are always happy to see each other and share their feelings and experiences, and that they help to better cope with life's difficulties. But that can't be the case, even from the start. Rachel remembered the poster offering a reward for her murder. When they find out who she is, they will despise her too. On the contrary, Betsy was inspired and asked, since she received an invitation, it means she will go to the meeting today. I won't go, said Rachel. However, no matter how you felt about her, the maid's persistence was stronger, and now Cecilia was joyfully greeting her. Getting out of the carriage, the green-eyed girl asked what had happened. The Duchess asked if she knew anything. She just heard Arthur say that he warned her. Rachel took out the letter and said that she received it this morning. In the letter, he asked to set aside time, and that he would come. After reading, the girl scratched her neck and said that he had not explained anything. Then, Cecilia admitted that a big reception was starting today and asked her friend, since she wasn't particularly attracted to social events. She said that the grand reception is the largest ball that is held in the imperial palace, and then it turns into a festival in the city where all the representatives of the aristocracy gather. And today is the first day of the holiday, and there will be a lot of interesting things. She invited the girl to go together. But Rachel immediately responded sharply, I don't want to. I don't like large crowds of people. But she still gave in to persuasion, and already walking along the crowded street, she thought why she was here. Cecilia said that in the evening, it would be even better. And so the girls reached their friends. Arthur said hello to Rachel, and his friend said irritably, You didn't explain anything to Ray. The boy smiled sweetly and said that no matter what, they still came together. The Duchess pushed him. When Rachel noticed Nathan and asked about his clothes, she thought she had seen them somewhere before. The guy said that this is the uniform of the knightly order. There will be a lot of people at the celebration today, so he will monitor security. He explained that he now had free time. He was awaiting orders from the head of the order, who had gone on a tour. Perhaps Nathan said that he was already drinking somewhere, and, exhaling heavily, explained that he was a rather idle person, but he could enjoy the holiday. A group of friends took a walk, and Cecilia asked how they were. Was it really nice here? This is the biggest holiday in the empire, and many traders from other countries come here. The girl thought irritably, what was good about this? Arthur noticed the gloominess of his new acquaintance, but said nothing. They seemed to want to buy strawberry mochi, and Cecilia asked if she had tried them. Rachel had never been to such a place. Suddenly, Cecilia gasped and said that there was also an oriental dessert with strawberries inside, and asked her friend if she wanted to try it. She asked him to wait a little while she bought mochi, told Arthur to meet him later at the central bridge, and invited Nathan to come with her. The girl with red hair and green eyes looked at Cecilia in surprise and called out to her. Arthur laughed and said, Cecilia seems to care about you very much. Rachel didn't understand what he meant, and she asked about her. But why? The young man was confused about what to answer and doubtingly said, simply, but at that moment, Rachel didn't even listen to him. She turned her attention to the counter next to her. Arthur asked, Do you need a knife? The red-haired heroine took one of the provided assortment and said that she needed it to use magic. The guy asked, So the knife is a tool for using your magic. He heard for the first time about such use of a knife in spells. The young man said that he uses precious stones. He has mineral magic. Sometimes he wears jewelry, but more often gloves. It must be very expensive, Ray said. Arthur said that was true. If it weren't for the family situation, he would have lived his whole life without being able to use magic. For him, stones are expendable material, the girl thought, which means that her life is also something like an expendable material, although if the doses are not lethal, she will not die. Rachel told her friend that she had relatively economical magic. The guy said that he didn't hear, but the girl didn't pay attention. Arthur felt a bit uneasy and scratching the back of his head. He exhaled and said, It felt like their conversation had been cut off in the middle. Although the girl who moved away from him was a mage, she was still very unusual. Most mages learn emotions from their parents. They learn such basic human feelings as fear of death, morality, ethics, empathy, and love. They can adapt to society and learn to use their powers to their advantage. And at the age of 12, they are no different from their peers. But Rachel, as if she hadn't gone through this path at all, she saved Cecilia, and her behavior does not go beyond the generally accepted norms. But looking at her walking down the street among people, a feeling of isolation appears. There was a strong sense of tension towards this world, and perhaps even hostility, and he was worried about her. Magicians, without learning to feel, are easily capable of causing harm to people, and in the future, they become dangerous to society, destroying themselves and everything around them. Arthur thought she was only 15, but she was just a child and needed protection. Following the girl, making his way through the crowd of people, he said that it would be better to hold hands. It could be too dangerous in the crowd. However, in response, the yellow-eyed blonde received an emotionless, detached look and the words that she could go alone. The boy said that she might get lost. Ray continued walking forward and said that she never gets lost. And also, there is no need to treat her like a child. The next moment, a man passed by, and Rachel disappeared from sight. The guy grabbed his head and exhaled heavily, reminding himself that when you walk with a small child, you should always hold his hand. Not much time passed before our red-haired heroine, looking at the floor in surprise, thought that this was strange. Rachel realized that 30 seconds ago she had said that she was not lost in the crowd, but now she could not figure out where she was. The green-eyed girl went out into the alley, where it was not so busy, and said that it was not she who got lost, but he who lost her. Walking through the deserted area, she thought that there were too many people there. First, she needed to go further away, but moving deeper, a familiar feeling overtook her. Right. Now she understood what kind of place it was. This was that very alley. This place would become her hideout in 3 years. Remembering the moments she had lived through, Rachel remembered how hungry she was, and how she always hid behind the garbage in the pipe. How cold it was. The air here was damp and foul. In this dirty and dark place she hid from evil people. It was the only safe place. And, both then and now, she felt uncomfortable being here. When suddenly, a man's voice said that it was unusual to see such a rich girl on the street and asked if she had run away from home. Rachel sighed in frustration. There were always nasty characters in alleys like these who could pester you. The dark-haired man asked if she had had a fight with her mother. His friend asked, or with her boyfriend. To which the red-haired lady calmly and honestly replied that she was lost and wondered if everything was exactly the same as before. "What a pity," said the third, and asked if she knew what happened to those who got lost in these nooks and crannies. The dark-haired man said with a grin, "Very funny things happen to the poor sheep that climb over the fence." The men gradually surrounded her, and Rachel was as calm as usual and advised them not to touch her. "I'm so tired of being perceived as a small and weak girl," she thought, while the men burst into laughter. Because she looks young, those around her see her as easy prey. They see that she is weak and she becomes a target. She had to deal with the scoundrels who surrounded her on all sides. But how tired she was of it. Rachel said they seemed so stupid that they didn't understand the warnings. The man grabbed her by the collar and asked what she was talking about. The baby put her hand on the man holding her. "I tell you, it's better for you not to touch me," she warned them. The girl said. She looked at him with a very cold gaze, and only at that moment the scoundrel realized that something was wrong here, after which a scream was heard. At the same time, one guy was thrown out of the establishment and was swearing at him for interfering with his trade. The man asked irritably what these checks were in the middle of the day. The guy with red eyes said that he should have been watching his trading properly. As he walked down the road, he said irritably that if there were a lot of hooligans, then there should be inspections. Suddenly, he heard a man in the alley loudly asking, "What's wrong? Did you cut my hand?" And he stopped. While the man continued to threaten, the guy had already reacted and jumped on him from above, hit him on the head, and irritably asked what was going on with security. He asked the rest what kind of disorder there was during the holiday. The fair-haired one asked who he was to interfere. "Is it him?" the guy asked, and happily answered. Pointing at himself with his finger, smiling, he said, "He is the assistant to the leader of the nightly order." "As we believed you," the hooligans exclaimed loudly. The red-eyed youth began to check his pockets, remembering where he had put the documents. The man he kicked in the head had already stood up and, threatening with a knife, said that if he was the assistant to the leader of the order, then he. But the next moment, the guy took out his ID and said to look carefully. "There are 2 swords here." Now the hooligans realized who they were dealing with and ran away. The guy smilingly said to watch their step. Lucky for them, Rachel thought. She was about to deal with them. The guy asked if she was hurt. The street was dangerous for walking alone. Turning away, she said that it was not necessary to save her. The danger threatened them more than her. By the way, they took her new knife. The young man asked how she planned to deal with them. She replied that she simply wanted to repay evil with evil. But you disturbed me, she said. So nothing came of it. What a foolish thought. So small and so cruel, he thought. After patting the little girl on the head, he said that in such cases, it is customary to simply thank her for her help. Rachel frowned and asked the guy with displeasure, "Who else was here?" "The little girl." He pulled his hand away. As she suddenly looked into the face of her savior, her eyes widened. Ray was very surprised. And the guy, with concern and affection, asked what was wrong with calling the baby a baby. This man, she knew him. Looking up at his face, she raised her eyebrows and wondered why she had met him now and not at another time. The young man raised an eyebrow in surprise and asked why she was looking like that. Of course he knew he was cute. Rachel Chloe replied that she was simply surprised by your happy face, and this interpretation was also surprising. The red-haired girl remembered how he, exhausted and distant, turned to her at the funeral and told her how much he hated her. Then she drove away emotionlessly and answered, "If you want to get a divorce, that's what we'll do. I don't care." All she remembered was his gloomy face. The guy asked. So she liked him, but it wasn't quite right. She was still a baby. She realized that he didn't know about her yet, and said that she had arranged to meet some friends in the central square, but had gotten lost. "It was not necessary to save you, but it seems that help in showing the way is needed," he said, smiling to the young lady to follow him. After walking a little, he pointed with his finger and said that there would be a central square over there. "Yes, and my friend is already standing there," Rachel said quite cheerfully, looking into the distance. Pointing his finger at the guy calling her, he asked if she was talking about him, and the girl confirmed it. He asked if this was her boyfriend and said that dating is good, but don't stay out late, come home early. "This is not her boyfriend," Rachel said, frowning indignantly. The young man laughingly said that at her age everyone said that. But after this dialogue, Rachel said that she would go, and before leaving, she turned around and said goodbye to Tyler. The guy was surprised. He was a little embarrassed and said, "Okay, bye," while a blush appeared on his cheeks. Seeing that she was already there, he met her friend upstairs and said that she left without even looking back. But it was still nice to see her with friends. The smile never left his face, and he remembered the recent dialogue and thought that she spoke as if the whole world had turned away from her. He walked among the crowd and said to himself, "Well, today is the beginning of the holiday. How beautiful it is outside, and how lonely it is." He remembered how she said goodbye to him and thought that her words sounded somehow unusual, maybe because of her appearance. "Oh well," he scratched his head, looking at the floor in embarrassment, wondering what he could possibly have with a little girl. Such dirty thoughts flashed through his head, he said, and suddenly stopped, turned back, and wondered if he had told her his name. At the same time, Rachel was already with her friends. Arthur asked if she was okay. Cecilia asked where she had been. And after that, the girl with blue hair, smiling brightly, said that they had been looking for her for a long time. Arthur asked his friend if she was drunk. Cecilia said that she was not at all. He said, therefore, that she had been drinking. Waving her arms, his girlfriend said that there was a tasting. She drank one glass, but she was not drunk. After she put her head on Ray's head, she said that she was having a hard time, and the guys figured out why Nathan didn't stop her. Snuggling up to her friend and putting her arm around her shoulders, Cecilia told Rachel that she loved her very much. The girl said that she was not that good. The tipsy Duchess smiled and told Rachel that she was a very good person, after all. She had saved her. She was her benefactress. Rachel took those words in her own way and thought she only meant well, but she wasn't there. "That's right," said Cecilia, taking a box out of the bag she was still holding in her hands. "Try this." She held out something soft and asked her friend to say, "Ah!" And Rachel repeated after her in surprise. She began to chew, not understanding what kind of sweetness was put in her mouth, and Cecilia, admiring the fact that she was eating mochi, covered her mouth with her hands. The Duchess hugged the Marchioness and said how sweet she was, and Ray asked when she would come to her senses. Arthur answered slowly, "And she'll probably be very ashamed tomorrow when she remembers her behavior." "It seems she's new to this," Rachel said. After talking with her friend and watching her brother and sister, She looked into the box that Cecilia had given her. Soon she took one out and bit into it and began to chew. It was tasty and sweet. She thought strangely, this is the same life in which the same events should happen. Initially, her life should have been uninteresting and monotonous, but events arise that are different from what she remembers. In the end, that first choice to save Cecilia led to different consequences, but the future will not change because of new events. If someone tries to kill her again, she will definitely do the same, and as a result, she will have to go on the run again. It's hard to even imagine that in 3 years, she could already be living a completely different life. But then Arthur noticed her serious and gloomy expression and asked what had happened to her. She said that she had met an acquaintance. The young man asked if he was an unpleasant person to you. Rachel replied, "No, not particularly, although he didn't like me. He asked if some person disliked you, but she didn't care. She said that she had no intention of hating anyone." Arthur said sadly. Could he then ask why she was so wary of this man? Rachel was very surprised and asked incredulously if she was being wary. Then the guy asked if she didn't know. She thoughtfully turned her head to the side and said, "It's not that. I just want him to know what she's like and change his attitude." When suddenly the lanterns lit up in the vastness of the night and not crowded street, she opened her eyes wide. "You see," said Cecilia, "she said that it would be beautiful here in the evening." The Marchioness agreed with her. Looking up in fascination, she thought that this was the first time she was seeing streetlights during a holiday. She was more accustomed to that stinking alley. It felt like she was somewhere she shouldn't be. And yet, if her life changed a little, perhaps she could escape the darkness, as Cecilia took her hand and pulled her along. She told her savior that this way they could get good seats. Ray didn't understand what she was talking about, but this face, smiling sincerely at her, said that there was no time left at all. Yes, she wanted to believe her words and not resist, follow like fire. "This is not yet certain, but I think that such a life as now, will definitely be able to pull me out of the darkness." Fireworks were launched in the sky. It was a joy to watch them. They were enchanting, and Arthur asked how she liked it. It was not bad, wasn't it? And then Rachel agreed. She raised the tips of her eyebrows. A barely visible blush appeared on her face, and a barely noticeable smile. It was quite good. Whatever the future held, she wanted to enjoy what she had now. The next morning, Tyler was standing at the sink complaining about how bad he felt, and a guy came into the room and told him that he should have drunk less. Tired, somewhat sleepy and hungover, the guy asked, "When did you arrive, brother?" Smiling, Count Adam Roderick and Tyler's older brother replied smiling, "Just now, the whole corridor could hear you vomiting." So he got up. Covering his ears, the younger brother said that his head was ringing from his voice. Adam asked why he was always drinking. In response to the head of their clan, the guy said with a smile that drinking always has such consequences, and with a heavy sigh, he asked what kind of excuse this was. By the way, Tyler suddenly asked his brother, "What are you doing in my room this morning?" Adam looked away thoughtfully and said that he had wanted to tell him for a long time, but they had not seen each other for a very long time. Tyler, horrified by this introduction from his brother, plaintively asked what had happened. Adam scratched his forehead and said it would be better to say it in a more serious setting, but said he was very sorry, but he was Tyler and engaged. The guy needed a few more seconds to process what he had heard, and then he sharply asked what kind of nonsense he was talking about. The head of the Roderick clan said with a smile that his bride was the daughter of the Marquise Chloe. The guy shuddered. And Tyler, discouraged and saddened, asked if this was the same Logan father Chloe knew. His older brother happily announced that this was indeed the case. This was Logan's sister Chloe, and he would see her at the ball tonight. At the same time, Logan Chloe himself sat in his office and thought about the fact that his father might know everything. Not long ago, he came to his father and asked if she was too young for engagement, and he replied that they had already agreed. They needed this union. The guy thought about how he wanted to stop this, but he couldn't do anything. How could he explain everything to Rachel? And then his younger red-haired sister, with green eyes, entered the office and asked why he called her. The young man thoughtfully said to his sister, "It seems you will have to go alone." The girl said that she didn't care. There was no need to worry about it. The guy was a little surprised by this dry reaction, and said that regarding the engagement, their father was not giving in to persuasion. But Rachel, without thinking, answered quite cheerfully that it didn't matter to her. Logan asked if she was really okay. The girl replied that it had to happen sometime. Her brother said, "I understand. He probably perceived her as a little girl." "By the way," Logan suddenly said thoughtfully, and somehow coldly, looking away, he wanted to talk about those words. The girl asked what he was talking about, and the guy answered, about the words she said in the hallway. She was interested in which ones exactly. Logan replayed in his mind how his sister had spoken about their family relationship and her loneliness, and told her to forget it. And raising his head, he looked straight into his sister's emotionless eyes and said that if she needed help, she could contact him. Rachel didn't quite understand what kind of help was being talked about and said that she didn't think she would need help, and the young man asked why she thought so. She said this in her mind, because at the most dangerous moment he, instead of helping, would start attacking her, and told her brother to forget what she said and that she had gone to get ready for the ball. Soon the door closed behind the girl, and the young man again fell into thought, saying that she was behaving suspiciously. He was interested in what he had done wrong. And so, having already arrived at the ball, the first thing she did was meet Cecilia, who very embarrassedly apologized to her for yesterday. Rachel said she had fun and saw for the first time how alcohol could affect a person. The Duchess said with embarrassment that she had become too excited, but her expressions of love were sincere, and the Marquise thought about it. She said that, as an apology, she would tell one important thing, that the cakes can only be tried in the Imperial Palace. They have saffron added to them. And this is a cupcake, and the meat is brought from the southwestern lands of Ibrico. She must definitely try all of this. After all, Cecilia was the complete opposite of Logan. That's what her future daughter-in-law was like, Rachel thought. How can I say this? She is very sweet. Wherever she is, it immediately becomes brighter and lighter. It felt like even the atmosphere was changing for the better. But why did she marry the cold Logan? If Cecilia simply attracts people's attention, then the man who leads them is Arthur Robert. He doesn't have any special achievements yet, but he does have enormous popularity among the ladies. And so, as soon as they remembered about him, this yellow chick immediately looked in their direction. The girls prayed that he would not come up. And while the young man smiled brightly at them, Rachel discontentedly suggested to the Duchess that she go away from here. Because of Arthur, others would come here too. But the guy approached and said that when people around you find out that you are a magician, you too will have no end of admirers, because magicians are always curious about society. Cecilia said she didn't think it was just that. Right? The blonde man replied with a bright smile. There are usually several reasons why people pay attention. By the way, Cecilia, the guy said, smiling and squinting his eyes. The girl asked, no need. She said that because of him, no one approaches her. They are, of course, friends. But she also wants a romantic relationship. Please, as much as you like, he's not trying to dissuade her, Robert said smiling and promised that this was the last time. And the very next moment, the friends walked out into the center of the hall and began to dance, simultaneously communicating with each other. Sweet Cecilia and the respected magician Arthur Robert. They attract all the attention of the guests. Even too much attention, Rachel thought that such an amount was as annoying as universal hatred. And yet Arthur is very smart. He quickly drove everyone away from himself, and after biting into the cupcake, she thought it was quite tasty. If she were the beggar from the dark alley, she would try everything there is here. But now she is a lady with her reputation to think about. Having put several cakes and cupcakes on a plate, on the advice of the Duchess, she decided to retire and try a piece of everything. At the same time, a girl with silver hair was watching the couple dancing sweetly and cooing to each other. The girls were discussing that the emperor would not show up today. They said he was not feeling well. Not far from the gossips sat the red-haired marchioness, who, having eaten all the desserts, thought how delicious they were. By the way, my friend, she thought, my ears are very tired. I wanted to get away from prying eyes. But here, it turns out, they are gossiping. They discussed how Lady Richard was such a sweet lady, how impudent she was, how she was admired for her pretty face. Here she is, flirting left and right. How nasty. Seeing Cecilia nearby, she thought that she heard everything. The girl thought about how she would answer them. But contrary to her expectations, her friend turned around and left. Rachel was thinking how much she didn't want to get involved in this, but it looked like she was going to have to intervene when suddenly she bumped into someone. The girl with purple eyes and silver hair apologized for her carelessness and for the fact that they bumped into her. "Nothing," Rachel answered. She didn't see her either, but then the gossips realized that there was someone else here besides them and decided to leave. The girl the Marquise encountered also drew attention to them and said that they were not worth messing with. She explained that they say this because they are jealous, although it is too much, because they cannot say anything to someone's face. The girl also worriedly reported that it seemed to her that Lady Cecilia was very upset. She said that she didn't know her well, but she thought it would be better if she were the one to comfort her. Rachel raised her eyebrows in concern and asked if she was asking her to comfort Cecilia. But she couldn't find her. I thought that even if she found her, it would be a problem to console her. But she never did that. She didn't understand why she was so concerned about these conversations. If she had asked her to deal with those gossips, she would have gladly agreed. And why does she think about it so much anyway? What difference does it make to her what Cecilia feels? But she noticed Nathan and came up to him and said that they needed to talk. She thought that it would be better to entrust this matter to him. At the same time, standing on the balcony, Tyler yawned and said that this was a boring ball. All those present were uninteresting people. By the way, he suddenly remembered the words of his senior brother and asked, "My fiancé is among them." "Grind," he drawled, and also on Logan's only sister Chloe. This idea did not please him at all. Suddenly, the young man noticed a couple of people walking up the stairs to his balcony, talking about something. Recognizing the lady as his friend, he waved his hand and happily said that they had met again. He asked, "Is she the same young lady he met yesterday, right?" Rachel said. Nathan was surprised by the assistant leader. The young man approached his subordinate and asked why he was with her. Maybe they were on a date, and the guy said that he also wanted to ask if they knew each other. Tyler happily said that he helped her find her way yesterday. It was amazing, he told his friend. But it was the same person he was talking about yesterday. Rachel realized that it was the party animal. The leader's assistant was indignant and worriedly asked if this was too much, since he had worked yesterday, saved this little girl, and was on duty. He asked Nathan to tell him in more detail whether he was afraid of heavenly punishment, since he was dating such a young lady. The guy said that they were just friends. Moreover, they are only 3 years apart. You shouldn't judge by yourself. And Rachel irritably said that she is not a child, and he will regret his hasty conclusions. Tyler spread his hands and mockingly said that if she was a baby, then she should be called a baby. Having calmed down, he said, then she would have told him her name, so he could call her, and asked what her name was. Marchioness Rachel was about to introduce herself to the guy. What is her name? But suddenly there was a loud ringing sound, and then the sound of breaking glass, and a piercing female scream. All three turned around at once. They went down lower and had to push through the crowd to get to the scene. And coming out to the place where the wall debris had fallen, she saw Arthur and Cecilia. The young men became worried and asked if they were okay. It seemed that the wind had risen too strong, but it was an accident. Arthur suffered more than she did, Cecilia said. The guy had shards of glass on his head and a cut cheek. He said he had a small scratch. Everything happened unexpectedly, and he didn't have time to use magic. The ball is over, Arthur announced. The royal servants are nowhere to be seen. We need to check what is going on. The brother immediately ran to his sister and asked her caringly if she could get up, while Rachel looked at the broken glass at her feet. The girl walked straight along the glass, closer to the epicenter of what happened. Tyler worriedly told the little girl that it was dangerous. In turn, she had already leaned over and, taking the glass in her hand, discovered that it was actively shaking. And having already understood what was happening here, she squeezed the glass in her hand and said, "It seems this is not an accident." "What is it then?" they asked. Then Rachel let go of the shaking and bloody glass. It flew up, and she explained, "It's magic." After this, all the broken glass flew up, and the red-haired Marquise, alert, explained that this was an attempted murder. After that, a creepy figure formed from the glass fragments, and the fragments instantly flew towards Cecilia. Drops of blood fell on the floor. The people who came to the ball began to fuss. Cecilia lay on the floor in horror. looking at the glass trembling near her face. Using magic and protecting her friend from the shard, Rachel began to realize that her power was not enough. Too little control for a 15-year-old girl, but she could hold someone like him. A current of wind formed in the air. Arthur asked what it was. Ray had such strong mana, he thought, and her reaction was simply amazing. It was beyond the scope of a 15-year-old teenager. Tyler was shocked. Now he understood what her words meant, that he would regret calling her baby, since she was a mage and with a fairly high level. Everything seemed to have stopped. The young men looked around, and Cecilia, trembling, pressed herself against the wall. She already thought that she would die. Only one red-haired Marchioness Rachel decided to go to the end and asked irritably and angrily who he was. The voice from the resulting silhouette of a head asked who she was, how she dared to interfere, and said that he was seeing her for the first time. The glass monster said that he liked her, and, having already launched a stream of glass at her, invited her to show what she was capable of. She prepared herself, although it was not the most suitable state for battle. But if he dared to pounce on her, she would gladly accept his challenge. Blood gushed from the wound on her arm, transforming into magic. But before she could do anything, Arthur cast a shield on them. He said, frowning and forming a magic circle, that it was time to put an end to this outrage. He would not tolerate it any longer. Rachel looked at his broad back with irritation, the space around her thickening with anger. "Nasty Robert," the glass monster's voice suddenly said. "He's just a magician, but he's pretending to be a good citizen." It would be easy, Arthur thought, frowning and gathering his magic again. A mage no higher than an average level. He could not compare with the heir of the Robert family. But the next moment, the monster right in front of his nose changed the direction of the attack and said that he himself knew that he could not cope with it. "But," he said, showing him in the reflection of his mirrors, his friends, "he has one weakness, and so Arthur Robert. Who will he save?" asked the magician. But the very next moment, this powerful magician covered everyone present in this hall with a magical dome. The aristocrats were happy that they were alive, admired Arthur, and Rachel wondered why this whole show was necessary. The guy himself spent too much energy on creating protection and realized that he needed to rest, but he wouldn't be able to do this in battle. The monster said that it seemed like his mana wasn't enough to protect himself, and a shard of glass instantly pierced his chest. Cecilia and Nathan, having just noticed this, immediately rushed to his aid, and Rachel stood dumbfounded in horror. Something had touched her consciousness. Now was not the time to be distracted. The monster was already talking to her, pointing a shard of glass straight at Rachel's head. But the next moment, she felt someone first grab her by the shoulder, then cover her head and shield her with their body. Blood from Tyler's hand spurted right next to her eyes. "How menacing," he said, clutching the wound on his shoulder. "But why?" the girl asked. The Count raised an eyebrow and said that usually people say thank you for saving someone, but if it weren't for him, she would have been hurt. Rachel found it difficult to accept all of this. She was scared, anxious, and new and previously unknown feelings were arising in her body. She looked at her friend and rival, looked at her future husband. They all saved her, were very worried, but in the end, they themselves came under attack. It felt like she was drowning more and more in this swamp of darkness, evil, irritation, and mixed emotions. Her hands were shaking. "He thought," said the glass face, grinning. "She is strong, but you are so afraid." After these words, Rachel shuddered and immediately came to her senses. The magic monster said that she has strong magic, but still listens to other people. She clenched her fist in resentment, and blood began to flow from the wound. He called her a simpleton, and she asked with resentment who else was afraid here. The next moment, she transformed the blood flowing from her hand into a magic circle and thought that she would definitely tear him to pieces if that was what he wanted. Arthur felt a very strong mana and believed that it was dangerous and could also lead to serious consequences. He had to figure it out himself, even though there was a small wound, but he was sure that he could handle it. And, shielding his friend, he said that he would do it himself. Rachel was shocked, and the upstart was confident that he could handle and destroy him with one blow. After the blow, the space was filled with light, and the green-eyed Marquise grimaced, not understanding what this Arthur Robert was doing. The glass flew away after the monster, and finally he turned to Rachel and told her not to fall for people's deception and not to let emotions into her heart. He said at the end that he would repent if she lost her essence as a magician and wished them a quick meeting. The people standing behind them worshipped the mages with admiration, and Tyler said that the power of the mages was something incredible. It seems he used glass, Arthur said, smiling. If we remove all the glass from the estate, he won't be able to get near them anymore. After that, as if nothing had happened, he turned around and asked Cecilia if she was okay. The girl answered that she was, and asked how he was. The guy from the Robert family said that it was nothing. He would ask the healer to cure him, and then he turned to Rachel and asked if she was hurt. The young marquise was darker than a cloud. She clenched her hands into fists and said that the problem was not that at all. He had disappeared. It was necessary to kill him. The experienced magician said that what was important now was that no one was seriously hurt and smiled at her. Rachel, in turn, looked at the deep, bleeding wound on his chest, frowning, and then turned away abruptly. The young man never understood at what point he made a mistake and how he upset his girlfriend so much. Afterwards, they announced that the ball was officially over. It was dangerous here, and they had to leave, while Tyler sat on the stairs, trying to bandage the wound, from which the blood was pouring out without stopping. Then a little girl came up to him and asked why he intervened. She clearly said that she didn't need saving. The guy said that he didn't know that she was a magician, and it was incredible. But the red-haired marquise was serious, and again said that she could take care of herself. She asked him not to interfere next time. "What offensive words," said the Count. He didn't interfere, but was worried about her. And he also explained to her, smiling, that his body reacts faster than his thoughts, and there's nothing he can do about it. He took the girl's hand and said, "They say that every magician has his own means for magic," and asked, "Does that mean that for hers it is blood?" "So what?" Rachel asked. He replied that she needed to cut herself in order to stab her opponent. How ironic. Having wrapped the wound on the baby's hand, the guy said that everything is ready. When you return, ask for help from a doctor so that there is no scar left. "Well, well, I have to go," Tyler said, smiling sweetly. "Be sure to treat the wound, okay?" And getting up from the stairs, he headed towards the exit. She looked after her fiancé. She saw that even the bandaged wound was bleeding and, collecting her thoughts, she said, "She is Rachel Chloe." The guy didn't hear and asked again. Rachel introduced herself to Chloe. "Is it true?" he asked and said, "Good, he will remember." When he suddenly stopped, the young man asked Rachel again if she was Chloe and said, "What a coincidence, my fiancé has the same name." But then Adam ran up to the couple worriedly and asked Tyler what was going on, and his brother asked if he had just arrived. Suddenly, he saw who his youngest was standing with and asked if he had already met Miss Rachel. The young man still did not quite understand what his brother was talking about. He asked in surprise how he knew her. The Count rubbed his temple in shame for his younger brother and told his brother to observe etiquette towards the lady. With a wave of his hand, he said that he would then introduce her to him formally and said that this was Lady Rachel, his fiancée. The man's face at that moment was something to behold. So strongly did it convey despair and genuine rejection of everything. At that moment, the silver-haired girl cursed and said that she didn't think that there would be another mage next to Cecilia. "What should we do now?" The voice of the magician came from the mirror. He also did not expect that there would be two magicians there. The girl threw the mirror on the floor and told him to shut up. She screamed and asked how she knew. He should have done everything properly, and after a fit of hysteria, she walked away. "Brother?" He turned to the Count. "Think for yourself. Can this really be called an engagement? She's only 15, Tyler shouted. "There's an 8-year age difference between him and her, that this is a crime." Scratching the back of his head, the older brother said that at 15 years old, it was already officially allowed to get engaged. He asked why they were already engaged. He himself had married for love, so why should he? Adam asked to calm down and said that they would only marry when the lady turned 18. But even 18 years is too young, and she is now 15, especially since she is the only daughter of the Marquis of Chloe. Sitting down on the sofa, Tyler said that her family had nothing to regret. Usually at that age, they already start looking for an heir to an aristocratic family. He covered his eye with his hand and said that she was a magician. Her father definitely wanted to give his daughter to someone like her, no matter how you look at it, and there were a lot of strange moments in this engagement. Adam admitted that he wanted to use her to improve his relationship with the Marquis of Chloe, but that this was simply a precautionary measure for political reasons. If what he fears doesn't happen, then the engagement can be broken off. Tyler asked what will happen to the girl. His older brother looked away and said, "It's a pity, but her engagement will be broken off, and she will be put up for auction again." "So," Tyler asked, "he wants to use her for his own political purposes and then throw her away." "It doesn't have to be that way," he started to justify himself, but the younger one told him to stop. He understood the situation, and they would talk about the rest later. Adam asked where he was going. He answered to work. The elder one was surprised that his brother worked on weekends. It even came as a shock to him. But the guy explained that this was an order from the order. It was necessary to find out who ruined the banquet. At the same time, the sun had already begun to illuminate the windows of the houses, and shielding herself from them, Rachel thought that she had not slept all night. She kept thinking about the same thing, how the monster had hurt her friends, and then she wondered why she couldn't answer back then. Whether it was fear, the red-haired Marquise frowned, but she couldn't feel it. It was a low emotion for the weak and inferior. She always tried to protect herself, but never felt fear. On the contrary, those who appeared in front of her were afraid. Can't she admit that she lost that glass mage, but there was no victory or defeat? Or maybe she didn't want to be in debt to Arthur and Tyler. Whether it was anger or irritation, she didn't understand. What the hell is going on with her? What is this strange and unpleasant feeling? I need to find this damn glass magician. A maid came into the room and asked the mistress if she had woken up early. She asked Betsy to prepare everything for the trip. "So early?" she asked. But the Marquise answered. "Wait," Betsy asked. "But where would she go?" Rachel stopped. She said excitedly that she didn't know. She needed to find someone. The maid suggested that she contact Mr. Logan. She remembered that her brother told her to seek help, but she flatly refused, saying that she did not want it. At the same time, her friends met the three of them. Arthur told them that he was healed by a magician and asked if Cecilia was okay. The girl answered, "Yes." But because of her so many people suffered, she somehow feels uncomfortable that the criminal was not caught. Her friend told her not to worry. A request for help had come from the nightly order, and he would certainly be caught soon. Looking into the tea, she said that last time she was pushed into the river, and now this magician with glass appeared. But if the criminal is a magician, why did he just push her into the water the first time? It would have been much easier if he had used magic. Arthur said he didn't want to talk about it, but it was likely that two different people were trying to kill Cecilia. "By the way," Nathan suddenly said, there were several suspicious individuals at the banquet. During this time, Rachel came up to him and said that some ladies had spoken badly about her, and she asked him to console her. But the Duchess was not offended by the words of those ladies. She was simply looking for Rachel and accidentally went there, but did not even think of getting involved with them. "Maybe those companions were criminals," Nathan suggested. "Maybe they hired a magician to harm her?" But she didn't think so, the girl said thoughtfully. She knew those ladies, they just like rumors, but they wouldn't kill. By the way, it was so amazing that Rachel was worried about her. How touching that she asked to be comforted, Cecilia said. This already confused Arthur. It seemed that Rachel was gradually beginning to understand the feelings of those around her, he thought. The girl admired her magnificent magic. Nathan told his friend that he would lose to her. His sister agreed. But he found out one fact. Rachel is capable of killing a person. She has enormous strength, so she can do it if she wants to. If he hadn't stopped her, innocent people could have suffered because of her magic, and once she became known as a dangerous magician, her life would become unbearable. A blood mage, dangerous and ruthless, with such a bad reputation, she would be an easy target for attacks. Just then, the valet entered the room and told Monsieur Robert that he had a guest and asked who it could be. The man answered his master that it was Lady Rachel Chloe. Arthur's green eyes widened when he learned that Ray had arrived here. The girl entered the room where her friends were sitting and was very surprised. Rachel said, "I came because I wanted to talk." "Rachel, well done for coming. They were just wondering who would win." Cecilia shut her brother's mouth and asked how she felt. The girl told Rachel that Arthur had fully recovered and that Nathan could be ignored, and both boys were outraged. But the Duchess, not paying attention to them, said that she was very touched. She was not at all hurt by those words. There was no need to worry. The red-haired Marquise was taken aback by her friend's outburst and, raising her eyebrows questioningly, began to speak. But then she was interrupted again, this time by Arthur, who told her to sit down and that he would bring her tea. After a while, when everything was ready, he asked if this was what she wanted to talk about the glass magician. Rachel looked at her cup and didn't answer yes or no, but simply asked where she could find him. Arthur said not to worry about catching the criminal. The knightly order and his family had agreed to search together. No, the girl said. She wants to find him first, and Arthur asked if there was any special reason why she wants to find him. The girl explained that he attacked her and asked what reasons are needed to find the one who tried to kill you. Arthur, based on his guesses, was not entirely sure of the veracity of her words and asked incredulously if this was the only truth. Rachel only realized, upon hearing this question, that her plans and intentions had been revealed. A chill ran down her spine, and clenching her fist, she said yes. But based on what he had noticed and knew about mages, he exhaled heavily and said under his breath that she was going to go alone. Rachel said that's why she came herself. She doesn't know where to look for him, and asked him to tell her the way, and then she'll figure it out herself. Arthur thought about what was the best thing to do, whether it would be right to share the information with Rachel, and what if someone got hurt. Nathan said that he trusted Rachel more than Arthur. Cecilia said that this was not a bad thing, because she was very strong. But it is not such a simple problem, said the blonde. And the Dukes replied that he could be near her to prevent danger. What should he do? He thought. And he said that the Emperor had already issued a decree. There was a request for cooperation from the knightly order. As the heir of the Robert family, he could not act only at her request. Rachel tensed up and frowned. But if she agreed to participate in the investigation together, he could help her. It worried him. But in this way, he could prevent Rachel from going down the wrong path. And so they arrived at one mansion. Rachel asked what it was, and Arthur answered that it was the estate of one of the family of magicians, Allie. Viscountess Ophelia Allie uses time for her magic. She can help find a clue in the future and the past. The girl was quite interested in the answer. For example, it would be nice to know the future. Arthur said that she was about 500 years old. She did not age at all, and so they went inside. At the house, they were met by a black-haired witch, who said welcome. She was glad to meet them, and they hadn't seen each other for a long time, with Monsieur Robert. Arthur thanked them for accepting them. Despite the sudden visit of the Viscountess, Rachel could not believe that she was 500 years old. The girl said that if it concerns magicians, she is ready to help, and noticed that today he did not come alone. The baby continued to look at the new person with interest, and she said to Rachel, Chloe. In response, the Duchess smiled at her friend's friend and happily said that she had such a smart look and what a sweet lady she was. They sat down at the table, and Ophelia said, Now the cards will show why you came, and laying them out, asked them to choose 3, thinking about her question. They looked at each other and still decided that she would be the one to choose them. Rachel reached for the ones that caught her eye the most. There was a black-purple magic hovering and swirling around the Viscountess, and when she turned the cards over, she said, So that's it. The red-haired Marquise watched with interest what would happen next, and looked at her questioningly, expecting an explanation. Finally opening her eyes, Ophelia said that she understood what had happened to their friend Cecilia. But what should she do? The girl asked, because finding an answer to Lady Rachel's question would not be easy. The little girl was surprised. She moved her head back a little and, frowning, asked why. The woman explained that this magician hides his location and has unusual abilities to move outside of reality, for example, using glass or mirrors. Arthur confirmed this, and Ophelia said, To be more precise, he uses the property of reflection. The peculiarity of such magicians is that they do not show themselves. They hide in the darkness and reflect the dark sides of other people, like the mirror in the Snow White fairy tale. Rachel thought, so the real villain in the fairy tale was the mirror, not the queen, so Snow White is Cecilia. Then the woman pulled out another tarot card and said, In place of the queen is the card of desires. It points to a lady, their peer. pouring out her unsuppressed desires into the mirror. It seems that the incident at the lake was also caused by a wish that the demon whispered. It seems that the pieces are falling into place. So, Arthur continued, it was the queen who pushed Cecilia into the water, and the magician who broke the window was the magician from the mirror. They are accomplices. Rachel asked if they couldn't find the magician in the mirror. They could find the queen outside the mirror. The exact location is difficult to find out, the long liver explained, but her emotions can be a clue. She experiences negative feelings, anger, hostility, envy, and positive ones. Only goodwill towards him. Arthur Robert was very surprised that the criminal felt goodwill towards him, not anger. It's close to being obsessed with something you can't have. Ophelia said she thinks she's unrequitedly in love with him. The long-lived woman asked Mr. Arthur if he had any idea who it might be. He had no idea, and Rachel explained that there were too many candidates, which is why, he said, it was difficult to narrow down the list of suspects. But then the emotionless Marquise intervened in the discussion and said that they should think more simply. Those present did not understand what this meant. Then the little girl confidently told that if the queen committed a crime against Cecilia out of jealousy, then she would become Arthur's lover. The guy started asking different questions, not believing or accepting what he had just heard. Ophelia understood everything and asked if she was suggesting not to look for her, but to make her come here, and praised the girl, saying how smart she was. Rachel said that if she just danced with him at some ball, she would try to attack her herself. Arthur said that it was dangerous. True, the dear lady should be more careful, said the woman. The magician in the mirror, one of those individuals whose criminal inclinations are stronger even than the instinct of self-preservation. And fighting such a cruel sadist could be dangerous. Ray said it didn't matter. She was stronger anyway. Arthur said it was a bad way. But there is no other way to find out his location. And if there is, then let him share it. The guy said that for starters, they have a lead. He said that they had to come to an agreement with the knightly order and take action. But he was against her idea. Ophelia said that she didn't know anything. Rachel suddenly asked, pointing to the table, why she didn't say anything about the last card. Ophelia said that the card shows the result. If she says it right away, it won't be interesting, especially since the future depends on how you interpret it. Rachel asked if since she could predict the future, it was predetermined. The magician replied that she didn't know, depending on how she felt about it. On all the cards there is good and evil. Destruction is just destruction. People themselves define it as something negative. Smiling at the sweet girl, the long liver said, whether it will bring good changes or bad ones depends on the person. Rachel looked at the woman as if she had been waiting for these words her whole life, and now everything became clear. The next moment, she jumped up from the sofa and said that since they had finished, they had to quickly go and look for the criminal. And after these words, she went out into the yard. Miss Rachel seemed eager to get things straight, Ophelia said, asking why he wanted to talk privately. Arthur said he had a couple of questions about Rachel and asked if she knew anything about blood magic. Ophelia was dumbfounded, and the guy said that Rachel's mother was a magician, but left this world early, not giving her daughter the opportunity to learn emotions. But as far as he could tell, her magic was above the level of a teenager. She didn't have a teacher, but she was incredible. And the strangest thing was, it was unknown who her mother was, and how Rachel had lived all this time. The ancient manuscripts also say nothing about blood magic. Maybe she knows something about it. Ophelia thought devastatedly. Of course I know. But the last person to use blood magic was that man. She asked why he was so interested in it. The guy said that he was worried, although she was slowly starting to show emotions. But no matter how much trouble there might be due to her hostile attitude, of course, he would try to stop her, if anything. But when young magicians begin to feel emotions, they may feel ashamed of it. Confusion is a natural process. However, Ophelia suddenly asked, what does it mean that he should stop her, Arthur? This sounds too presumptuous. What? The guy asked in surprise. And the woman explained that Rachel had to go through these trials herself. She was not a disaster that needed to be stopped. Hearing this, the young man's eyes widened. Everything seemed to fall into place, and lowering his head, he realized that he considered her dangerous. The more doubts he had about Rachel, the more carefully he should look at himself, she said. Yes, that was right. Perhaps he wasn't worried about Rachel at all. But what kind of worry was that, he thought? Maybe it's the fear that society will reject her and start pointing fingers at how pathetic I am. I wanted to be a good friend to her, but all this time I suspected her because of my own insecurity. How shameful. So what can he do now that he has sorted out his emotions? He should not judge or suspect others and just believe in Rachel. At the end of their dialogue, the long-lived woman said that she could not help him in any way. No, the guy said happily. On the contrary, everything became clear. He did the right thing by asking her for advice. The woman said sadly that he should come more often. Old people love it when people come to them without a reason. A wide smile and a sweet laugh lit up the young man's face, and he said, "Okay," turning to Viscountess Allie. When he went down to his friend, she asked where they were heading now, and the young man replied that they needed to make a plan. He had agreed with Nathan. Rachel said firmly that she had to become his lover and not stop her. She had come to take part in the search. She had the right to do so. And contrary to her expectations, the guy said, "Okay, let's try to act out the scene." Rachel reminded him that he had forgiven her and asked why he had suddenly changed his mind. In response, the young man, smiling kindly, said that they were friends. It was natural that I believed her. Ophelia watched this whole dialogue from the window of the mansion and said how interesting it was turning out. She looked out the window, watching her guests, and thought, so Rachel Chloe is a blood mage. Fate comes into play after people begin to experience feelings in the depths of their souls. Arthur Robert, a symbol of good and the heir to a famous line of magicians, and Rachel Chloe, a symbol of evil from a line of blood magicians whose name was erased from history. The magician who has not yet been released will repeat his tragic fate. Will they be able to avoid the grief of their predecessors? Tyler asked how they could find the one who ruined the banquet. All they knew was that he was a mage. Nathan said that today news came that they would send a man from the Robert clan. He thought it would help. Tyler said that it was true. But is it really worth meeting here? The guy with light blue hair explained that they hadn't exactly agreed to meet here. He would find him himself. After all, he is from a family of magicians, said Tyler, and his subordinate immediately pointed behind him. That here he is coming. The guy was surprised. In front of him, he saw a rather unusual union of the magician Arthur and the little girl next to him. Nathan explained that this was the heir of Duke Robert and the daughter of the Marquise Chloe. And coming closer, the blonde introduced himself as Arthur Robert. Tyler said it was unexpected that the heir of the family came in person and introduced himself as Tyler Roderick, assistant to the leader of the order. "Okay with that," said the black-haired guy, pointing his finger at the girl in front of him and asking what the young lady was doing here. "What do you mean?" Rachel asked, and explained to her future husband that she had come to look for a criminal. The guy she was engaged to raised his eyebrows and asked if he was a criminal. But why? She replied that she just needed to. Tyler raised and frowned one eyebrow and said that she was Logan's sister to Chloe and asked if her brother had said anything against it. She said that he didn't really care about her affairs, and besides, she wasn't a little girl who needed a guardian. Rachel explained that she could decide for herself what to do. Tyler said that the brother and sister were so similar in character. But this comparison was unpleasant for the red-haired Marquina, and she, looking gloomily at the floor, said that she was not like Logan. Then Nathan, in horror, asked Rachel if Sir Logan was her real brother, and the future husband and wife asked in unison, "What's wrong with that?" "That's why you're so similar to him," said the Viscount. His boss supported his reasoning, and the little girl angrily said that they were not similar. "They have gathered here to find the criminal together. This is not the time for talking. First, they should leave here to a quiet place," Arthur said. Hearing the story, Nathan screamed, "The reason why this incident happened is because of him. It's all because of Arthur's jealousy towards Cecilia." The Viscount said he didn't understand why he was so popular. Arthur asked if he was more concerned about that than the fact that his sister had suffered because of him. "Of course," Nathan said indignantly. "Nothing could be done." Arthur asked, "Who would think otherwise?" Tyler was in shock. Ray was eating cookies and continuing to watch the two friends quarrel. Tyler thoughtfully said that for now he understands everything. He turned to Rachel and asked how she, little one, was going to catch the criminal. The Marchioness continued to chew the biscuits and said that she would pretend to be Arthur's lover instead of Cecilia. Tyler's expression was a sight to behold. He was in such shock, and Nathaniel was not far behind, and at the same time they shouted out what it meant. All eyes were soon directed at Arthur, and he raised his eyebrows and closed his eyes, explaining that this was how it happened. Rachel said the criminal would become jealous of him and come after her. Then she would catch her. Tyler even shuddered at the thought, and raised an eyebrow in concern as he asked if she thought she could do it. "Why not?" the little girl asked, and the guy reminded her that she had a fiancé. She said that no one knew about it, since the engagement was unofficial. Then Nathan asked in amazement what this meant to Rachel. What other engagement? Tyler covered his face with his hand. He wanted to express himself more gently, but his future wife answered without hesitation that they were engaged. She pointed with the cookie she was holding and said that she and Tyler. The guy looked uncertainly at the little girl next to him. "Since when?" Nathan asked. "Rachel said it happened a few days ago. She herself only found out recently." Arthur stuttered and congratulated her. Tyler the next moment turned to his bride, calling her baby, and said that an informal engagement was another matter. But this plan was very dangerous. She wants to become bait for the magician, who will probably try to kill her. He understood her desire to catch the criminal, but this is too reckless. As the assistant to the leader of the order, he is against it, and as her fiancé, he is obliged to protect her. The girl again remembered the events at the banquet, and she asked if he was taking on too much. She told Tyler not to interfere with her decision. It was just a contractual engagement. Then the young man said that perhaps she felt that he was meddling in something that was none of his business, but it was more of a concern than an interference. He said all this looking her straight in the eye, but Rachel still could not understand why she cared if she was stronger than him. Here Nathan supported his friend and said that he was also worried that she would end up in the most dangerous position. Arthur also raised his hand and said that he was on her side, but he was also worried about her. "They are all very worried," the girl said. She did not yet understand what feelings she was experiencing about this, but she felt good. But what should she do then? It turns out that because of them, she should suppress her desire, as they tell her. Tyler said he had nothing to say. Arthur said it was true. They couldn't tell her what to do. And Nathan said that mages were complicated creatures. And suddenly Tyler said, "Okay, he will help her. She can do as you see fit. But in return, I must promise him one thing, Rachel," the guy said proudly, like a knight. But then the decisive day came. Arthur said that we must hope that the criminal will come to today's ball. "Rachel," he said to her, "you remember what I told you about magicians who have not learned to show emotions?" She replied that he said they were dangerous because they lacked humanity. He said they would not hesitate to cause harm. Therefore, you shouldn't try to solve everything yourself. They should act together. The most important thing is her safety. Putting her hand to her head, she said that she understood. She had heard these words hundreds of times already. Then the coachman announced that they had arrived, and Arthur asked her to wait and said that it was a gift. He put a choker with jewelry around her neck, and Rachel touched it and asked what it was. The blonde magician told his friend that this necklace had his magic. He thought she would find it useful. He also said that he hoped everything would work out and extended his hand to Rachel. The young marquise placed her hand on his, and looking ahead with a precise and confident gaze, said, "Let's go catch the glass magician." With these words, she, holding the guy's hand, gracefully walked out of the carriage down the steps. Music was playing in the hall. Many guests were dancing. Only Nathan stood with a dissatisfied face. He did not like this situation, and even though he tried to dress up, it didn't give him confidence. He asked if they had come with him now. Tyler confirmed. But when he asked why he had to be a partner with him, Tyler said that he also couldn't say that he was very happy about it. And he asked where Arthur and Lady Chloe had gone. Nathan pointed his finger and said that in order to find Arthur, you just had to go up to the crowd. They walked up and started watching the dancing couple from behind the crowd. Nathan said that they were right for each other. Only, this turned out to be a big problem. The guys instantly looked at each other, and Tyler asked if he thought this plan would work. Arthur moved smoothly and gently, smiling at Rachel. But in turn, she was like a log. Then Tyler said they didn't look like lovers. Nathan said it felt like they were forced to dance together. And after their discussions, at the end of the dance, the guys approached their comrades and, apologizing, Tyler said that he would have to intervene. The groom told her that there was nothing he could do about her inability to dance, and asked what was wrong with her face. The girl asked what was wrong with that. The next moment there was laughter. Rachel turned around and saw Arthur's whole face turn red and tears form in his eyes. She asked why he was laughing. Then the black-haired guy explained, "You play too badly, they play lovers." But you can't tell from her face. Rachel looked up at her groom and asked what expression she should make then. Tyler said thoughtfully, if she had to pretend to be a lover, then she could at least make an embarrassed or worried face. Nathan and Arthur said it was too much for Rachel. The girl told the groom that they said it was too much. Then the guy thought a little more, and putting his fingers on his cheeks said, "Let's try something simple, smile." He said that if she smiles and walks everywhere with Arthur, people around her will think that you are a couple in love, and said to lift the corners of her lips. Listening to the advice on facial expressions, Rachel tried her best to repeat something resembling a smile, but only began to shake from the effort. The next moment, the guys who surrounded her almost went their separate ways, laughing. Arthur turned away, Nathan covered his face, and then Tyler, trying to hold back his laughter, said that they were not laughing at her. Ray lowered her head and said that they were laughing at her. "No," he said. "You just have a funny look on your face," and asked why she had volunteered to pretend in the first place. "I think this idea has failed. It's better to leave it." "No," said Rachel. "She will succeed." And, taking Arthur by the collar, stood on her toes. She asked, after all, they had to show by any means that they were a couple. So, and with this question, she kissed him on the cheek. The boys were stunned, and Nathan said he thought it was better not to laugh at Rachel anymore. He thought so too, Tyler said. But the next moment, the girl, as if nothing had happened, turned to them and asked if they had seen this behavior of the couple. Tyler said, "Well done." Arthur was still trying to come to his senses when the chief's assistant turned his gaze to the crowd in horror. All the envious ladies' eyes were directed at them, and he asked if this method was really normal. Tyler said, "So she'll become a target for the other ladies before she finds the culprit. They didn't expect that." Arthur finished. Rachel, in turn, continued to look at the crowd of girls, and among them, she noticed the lady who had spoken ill of Cecilia at the last ball. The girl walked forward and asked if they could follow them. Tyler asked them to wait and offered to go together. But his daughter-in-law turned around and seriously informed them that they would be noticed faster this way. They were not dangerous. She would just check the situation and return. The ladies were discussing the wig, which didn't suit her at all. She imagined herself an aristocrat and dressed up and put on very vulgar makeup. Overhearing their conversation, Rachel realized that they seemed to be gossiping about everyone. They were discussing an illegitimate child who was pretending to be an important guest, that she didn't even know the basic rules of etiquette. And Rachel thought, it didn't seem like they were talking about her and Cecilia. But she kissed Arthur, so why aren't such rumors spread about her? Or is she really that bad at acting? Suddenly, she raised her gaze from the floor forward and saw the same girl she had seen earlier. The little girl remembered that this was the same one who asked to console Cecilia, but for some reason, she had such a gloomy face. She looked again at the three gossips nearby and thought, maybe they were discussing her. What should she do? Just pass by. She turned away and went back, thinking that she had nothing to do with the glass magician anyway, and there was no point in getting involved in unnecessary adventures. But then she found herself in front of the gossips. One of them saw her, and, remembering that she was the one who danced with Arthur, asked if something had happened to her. "Listen," the red-haired marquise said proudly and seriously to Chloe, "know your limits." But she herself was thinking what kind of ridiculous situation this was, and why she was interfering in other people's affairs. And so, together with that lady, they moved into a room where she thanked her for her help. Rachel said that she hadn't done anything special. And 20 minutes ago, when she told the girls to know their limits, they saw the object of discussion and quickly ran away. Then Lady Rihanna asked to be allowed to treat her to tea with tiramisu dessert. Rachel went for the second one. And now she said that she had no intention of helping her, but simply felt disgusted looking at those ladies. She put a piece of dessert in her mouth and happily began to listen further, enjoying the tenderness in her mouth. Rihanna said she knew they gossiped all the time, but she never thought she would become the subject of gossip. She tries not to rely on people, but she can't do anything about unpleasant situations. Ray wondered why people were offended by this. She hugged herself by the shoulders and said, to be honest, she was a little surprised. Usually in such cases, no one shows a desire to interfere. Last time at the ball, too, she began to reason out loud when suddenly she looked at the lady in front of her. And then she happily said that they already knew each other. She was on the terrace then and was about to say something to those who were discussing Cecilia. And she stopped her. Rachel nodded her head and looked away with her green eyes and said, yes, I think that was it. In response, the silver-haired girl smiled and happily said how generous she really was. Moreover, she saved Lady Cecilia's life twice. She saw what she did at the big ball. She is an interesting person, Lady Rachel. The girl tensed up after these words. And Rihanna said that she would like to be friends with her. She never had any magicians among her friends, but she dreamed about it. Then she should make friends not with her, but with Arthur Robert, said Rachel. He is more correct than she. But Mr. Arthur is in close relations with Cecilia, said Rihanna. But the Marquise said that they are just friends. It can't be, the girl answered, embarrassed. And yet does someone like her have the right? Rachel asked why she didn't have one. Arthur was happy to have any friends. Rihanna continued to reproach herself for being so ugly and unworthy. Then Rachel said, and she really is an unprepossessing person, and asked, so that's why she tried to kill Cecilia. The girl with purple eyes shuddered. Her eyes widened, and she asked what she was talking about. But she is the queen, said the red-haired marquise, piercing the criminal with her green eyes. Rihanna asked what she was talking about, Lady Rachel. She didn't know why she thought that, but it wasn't her. If you're going to lie, then do it better. There's no logic in her words. She just said that she didn't know who she was when she found out that she saved Cecilia twice. She couldn't know that she saved her after she fell into the water, and most importantly, she saw everything herself, how you pushed her into the water. Rachel also thought that this wig didn't suit her. Because she had brown hair, Rihanna went cold. Just admit it, Rachel told the criminal. It was all her doing. The incident at the lake and the incident with the glass at the ball. She pursed her lips, offended by such an easy revelation, offended by herself for her own inattention. Then, what is not going to play with her feelings? She does not care whether you were jealous of Cecilia or were going to kill her. She only needed him. The look of his cold apple eyes was serious. She asked where the glass magician was. In response, Rihanna calmed down, laughed, and said that if that was the case, she thought it would be difficult for her to become friends with her. It's a pity, she said sadly. And the next moment, she screamed loudly and called out to Seth and ordered him to kill her. The next moment, the room began to shake, and a shard of glass flew at Rachel. However, she blocked the blow with the fork she had just used to eat dessert, and said, so he was here, that's good. She was looking for him, the magician asked, whose red eye was reflected in the glass. He was glad to meet her. Rachel replied that she, naturally, had to deal with him back then, so she had no special reason to meet him. The magician asked sadly. They were similar to her. He once again used the same attack he used at the grand banquet in the royal palace. And although Rachel watched her closely with her gaze, inside she thought that this magic did not work on her. She stabbed her hand with a fork and told the glass that its name was the wind. It seemed that it had not yet fully understood what was happening, but now that they had met, there was no way he could defeat her. The glass mage was surprised and said that the magic of transformation, which resembles alchemy, is the power of that very blood magic that there are so many rumors about. The whole world trembled in horror before the blood mages, but she possessed the power that could destroy any kind of magic. And after a short pause, the magician said that he also wanted to get her. Rachel asked irritably, so he laughed. The windows in the room were broken. His magic worked best on people like her. Rachel asked what he was up to if it was useless. But the next moment, the air in the room contracted. A hand came out of the mirror behind the girl and pulled her so hard that she didn't even have time to gasp before she was caught. The next moment, everything in the room calmed down and became quiet. Only the sound of heels and a voice was heard, that she had never seen anyone return from there alive. Got rid of another annoying person. And so she found herself behind a mirror in some strange mirror room and touched with her hand the place through which she had gotten here. She asked out loud what this place was. And, walking along a certain mirror corridor, she wondered if she had ended up inside the mirror. Rachel was asking the tag if he would finally show up and was looking down at her feet with caution when she almost crashed into the wall again. There was a pretty big cut on her hand, but the blood had already dried. She said that she would just go and break all the mirrors. But only after she started using magic did she realize that she couldn't use it. It would just dissipate in an instant. It's not surprising, because in the mirror there is only a reflection. She heard a voice and irritably asked what it meant. The magician told her that they were nothing more than reflections in this world. Her magic, which was in reality, does not work here. The anger seemed to be starting to build up, and although she didn't understand what she was feeling at that moment, the space around her was thickening. The voice said that they would never catch him. She only sees a reflection in front of her, and the real body will not be found. In response to the evil magician, Rachel frowned and said what a nasty magic it was. And the eye of the mage that communicated with her ordered her to speak. He asked why the blood mage Rachel Chloe was looking for him. The girl looked up at the reflection of that eye and said that she just wanted to get some air, that something was starting to change in her. She explained that she had never been afraid of death or defeat and had never been bothered by emotional outbursts. She again carried the situation of the banquet before her eyes and asked, but why at that moment she could not do anything? Was she really right? She began to experience emotions. She spoke about her thoughts to Rachel. The monster that had reformed in the reflection smiled and asked, so she had been looking for him just to ask this. He said that she seemed eager to know. She herself already knew about her changes. She began to feel. The more she communicates with ordinary people and learns their emotions, the more she becomes like them. The magician said, ordinary mages are quite capable of learning to feel by communicating with people, but for some reason, she is different from other mages. Even if she learned emotions, she still wouldn't be able to show them and fit into society. Rachel asked why he thought that. And then the magician answered, because she is different from the rest from birth, and that her essence will never change. Her essence. The girl thoughtfully said this phrase out loud and pondered its meaning. Then the voice asked if she really knew nothing about her magic. How could she have lived all this time in ignorance? The magician explained that blood magicians are considered the most powerful of magicians. They have long been feared by other magicians. They were the leaders of the magical community, which consisted of clans. But after that incident, the community of magicians was exterminated. Now those who remained alive obey the laws of this world. Their representatives are the magicians Robert. But they are traitors. They re-educate dangerous magicians to maintain their own power. Arthur Robert also wants to correct her in order to subordinate her to the human world, but it doesn't work on her. It seems that Arthur Robert doesn't know yet what kind of creature she is. She was born evil, the magician said, causing more and more horror. He hoped she didn't think they could ever fully accept her. He asked if she thought they would remain her friends if they found out she was a dangerous mage. On the contrary, they would be afraid that she would kill them, and in the end they will betray and abandon her. She is just being used now, and that's it. She should not allow them to do this. Must not let her power be taken away. Seth turned to blood mage Rachel Chloe and told her that she must listen to her voice. She must realize her essence. The shadows created by the magician enveloped her, and then Seth himself asked, she also hates people, but she has the strength and ability to run anywhere. If they unite, they will become invincible. They will destroy magicians like the Robert clan in no time, and everyone will be afraid of them, and no one will dare to interfere with them. They will become the most powerful magicians. The voice asked, isn't this a tempting offer? Exhaling, Rachel said that it was entirely possible, but she would not team up with him. The mirror magician asked why she didn't want to, and the girl replied that she had already made a promise to act with them. The voice spoke excitedly, saying that it didn't understand her, didn't understand what benefit it was to her, since she had come to him because she didn't want to admit that she had begun to feel something. The more emotions she experiences, the weaker she becomes, and she fears that they have tamed her. The magician said. He asked her loudly and defiantly if she was ready to become like the people filled with fear and doubt. But Rachel said he was right. She didn't like it. After all, these emotions can become her weak point, and most likely they will leave her when they find out who she is. But all this is not important, and perhaps she will lose a lot. but at the same time, she will be able to gain. She remembered Tyler's words and request to promise her one, the way he looked at her seriously and worriedly. During that conversation, he asked her to remember that wherever she might be, there were people who would be on her side. It seemed that at that moment, she thought that by finding herself in the past, she had ended up in exactly the place where she had always wanted to be. To a place filled with dear people, good acquaintances and friends, to a place that she can call home. Then, for the first time, she felt that she, too, had desires, and now she stood proudly before the decisive answer to her question. Rachel told the mage that even if they left her, it was okay, because she was the one who wanted to be with them. The magician was very surprised, but soon threw these emotions aside and said that she was very stupid, that she would regret her choice, although she no longer has time to regret it, because if she dies here, she will not have to suffer in reality. But suddenly, the choker lit up, and the next moment they were transported outside from the collapsing room. The magician asked in fear what had happened. She couldn't use magic, so how did he end up in reality? The boy wondered. But they had their own plan too, Tyler said. Rachel's necklace was a mineral that had adjusted to his magic. It was the end, said Arthur, who approached them, addressing Seth, and the guys blocked their girlfriend. The young man in the black robe called them idiots and said that they didn't seem to know that he could move to any place. Even if he is unable to defeat them, they will not be able to catch him. Once he hits the object that reflects, his flesh will not be found. But the blonde magician, looking at the boy with sadness, asked him to look at his hands. Seth looked down the next moment and was horrified to find that his hands were cuffed with magic, and asked when they had time. Tyler explained that these handcuffs were made of a metal crystal. They planned everything in advance, because they were responsible for the arrest. The guy cursed, and Arthur said that there was no point in resisting, and he wouldn't be able to use magic because of the crystal. Rachel's fiancé enthusiastically said that they only managed it thanks to the Imperial Court's budget. He told the criminal that the crystal looked like some kind of stone, but they all turned out to be expensive. Seth got angry. And after this monologue, having removed the hood from the boy, I thought, so this is what kind of criminal he is, who tried to commit murder. A small, disgruntled boy, with long, curly, wheat-colored hair and eyes full of rage. Tyler, looking at this man with alarm, thought that he didn't even look 18. Rachel looked closely at her enemy and helper, who had made her aware of himself, examining every inch of his face. Arthur looked at him with some sadness and thought that he was pretending to be great and all-powerful, but in fact, he turned out to be a young boy. Turning away from the criminal who fell to his knees, Rachel said that her role was over and told them to sort things out themselves. The young man, trembling with fear, agony, and resentment, suddenly asked in a terrible tone to kill him. The girl froze. At first, Rachel was even scared by such a request, or thought that it was a good opportunity, but soon she answered that she did not want to. The guy asked why she didn't want to. She herself said that she would deal with him, or she was pretending to be magnanimous in front of people. He asked her sarcastically if she was giving up her power for the sake of some pathetic little people, saying that she would regret it. The girl stood there for a while, but then turned around and said that it seemed he himself had not yet understood how useless force could be. The young man even went cold. He had never imagined that he could be answered like that. It left him in great shock. And Rachel said that she thinks that he wasn't always bad either. It's a shame that he didn't have friends around him. Tyler explained to his bride that Rihanna and Seth would be interrogated, most likely sent to prison, and punished for attempted murder. He asked what she intended to do now, since she had said that she had a reason for wanting to catch the criminal. Rachel narrowed her eyes and told the guy that her goal had already been achieved, and then he asked what that goal was. Then the little girl explained that she wanted to ask about what had changed in her at that ball. It was as if she realized that she was angry then, because she found herself in debt to him and Arthur. The assistant to the head of the order was very surprised by this, and he asked, so she just wanted to know about it. The girl nodded. In a state of shock, he put his hand on his forehead and said how incorrigible she was, and then asked if she was injured at all. And the next moment, the little girl, without hesitation, extended her hand with the cut. He looked at her with sadness and said that he still didn't like her magic. With sadness in his voice, he asked if it was really necessary to use his own blood, Perhaps animal blood would do. And then Rachel explained that the magic caused by her blood was the most powerful, and that this blood was also the easiest to obtain. This sounded very harsh to Tyler, and he said that she was not a thing and should take care of her body. When he suddenly said abruptly that this was in no way pressure, the girl replied that she knew that he was worried about her. The guy said he was glad she knew and hinted at a sequel. Rachel said that in such cases, you just need to thank. The assistant to the head of the order smiled and said that this was what he wanted to say, and the next moment she thanked Tyler. He asked again, as if he had not expected her to say this at all. His eyebrows raised, and a blush appeared on his face. He scratched the back of his head sheepishly and said that he felt like he had forced her to say it, but it was still nice to hear. Their friends were watching this. Nathan couldn't believe that Rachel was engaged, but now he sees that they look like they are in love. Unlike him. In response, Arthur laughed, and his friend asked if he wasn't surprised that none of them had a partner. The magician replied that if he didn't like something, he could find someone for himself too. Rachel glared at them and asked what they were talking about, since they were engaged by contract and nothing more. The groom took her away, looked at her with some pity, and smiling, said that that was true. At the same time, Rihanna struggled with the knights who were holding her by the arms. She screamed to let go, and that she would go herself. She screamed that they didn't take her seriously either, because of her background, and ordered them to take their hands off her. Suddenly, Cecilia came up to them and told the knights to let her go, because they were behaving rudely. The knights were surprised by the arrival of the Duchess, and she asked if they could leave them alone. She would like to speak with Lady Rihanna. The guys from the night squad reported that this was impossible, because she tried to kill her, and it could be too dangerous. Then the girl with bluish hair smiled sweetly and calmly, but sincerely asked them. The guys looked at each other, and deciding to give their mistress such an opportunity, said that they would wait outside the door, and if anything happened, she could call. Cecilia thanked the guards and watched them go, while Rihanna thought that when she asked them to let her go, they seemed to have gone deaf. Immediately after, Cecilia turned to the lady and said that she had heard that it was she who had tried to harm her. The girl looked away anxiously and without hiding said that it was true and asked what she wanted to talk about. They came to hear an apology, but the next moment, a small female hand hit her hard in the face. Rihanna's eyes widened in surprise, and pressing her hand to the place where she had been hit, she asked what she was doing. Cecilia said that because of her friend suffered. She knows that she did not grow up in the best conditions, and asked how it is possible to harm people just because of jealousy. She does not understand it. Rihanna's face darkened. She looked at the Duchess with hatred and asked what she knew about her living conditions, what she understood at all. Already a little late, she also said that they know nothing about her, people like her, who grew up in love. Her face changed again. She was ready to kill her with her eyes, and frowning, screamed and asked what she could possibly know. She was born out of wedlock, abandoned and given to a commoner family, and ended up in that family at the age of 8. They had big debts, so her father took her back to sell her again. She had the status of a lady, but she was humiliated everywhere. She was an outcast everywhere, and only Arthur treated her without prejudice. Her father forced her to marry an 80-year-old man, but she did not want it at all. In response, her father could easily hit her. It's a terrible feeling when you realize that you can't do anything of your own free will. That was her life. Rihanna said she has everything. She didn't even try. Cecilia said this world is unfair. The girl asked why she had to endure such humiliation. What was she guilty of? Lowering her head down, she switched to a calmer and quieter tone, saying that it was too unfair. Too much. Her life was ruined. It would be better if she killed her. Then it would be more fun to go to prison, Cecilia shuddered. She grabbed a nearby vase of flowers, and lifting it up and preparing to strike, told her to die, to perish. But the next moment, the vase in her hands shattered into many pieces with a crash, and all the water and Sveta poured out right on her. It all happened because Louis approached the girls. He arrived on time and asked Rihanna to calm down and stop ruining her life. The girl, whose silver wig had fallen off, turned to Arthur and tearfully confessed to him that she simply wanted to be loved. Her eyes were filled with tears. The silhouettes of people were blurred. They turned away from her, looking at the floor, and her own hair was intertwined with a silver wig. Realizing that this was where it would all end, she wandered across the room to the window, clinking her chains and grinning. She looked at her reflection and said how disgusting she was. The next day, Seth was already sitting in his cell and looking at the floor, when suddenly he heard the approaching steps stop. He raised his head, and seeing the magician Arthur in front of him, the heir of the Robert family, asked if he had come to laugh at him. The guy raised his eyebrows and said that he heard that he refused to take part in the order's investigation. The young man frowned and told him to get lost. His presence wouldn't change anything anyway. Arthur said that if he was so reluctant to help them, he would have a hard time adjusting to life in prison. The boy said that it was none of his business. The magician turned to Seth and said that he would not be able to avoid punishment anyway. It would be assigned in accordance with the results of the investigation. He asked him to think and make the right choice. The young man lowered his head and told him to stop talking and go away. He didn't want to hear anything from the traitor. Arthur told Seth that this was a serious problem, that turning a blind eye to an attempted murder would not work, that it was wrong. The guy asked if he was speaking incorrectly, listed ethics, morality, conscience, and asked if he came for this nonsense. Seth told the elder that he was sorry, but for him it didn't exist. Arthur asked why he thought so. The guy with red eyes took him away and said that he wanted to ask him, Arthur Robert, what the meaning of the greatness of life is. After all, every creature must kill another to survive. Is it really only human life that is worthy of more? People kill the weaker and want to control magicians. This is all human lies and selfishness. It is the ordinary people who are the most cruel, Seth continued to say, for they care only about their own lives. They created moral standards to control dangerous mages, forcing them to learn humanity and emotions. They want to subject the whole world to disaster, filling it with frames. It doesn't need the limitations of this world. It can survive alone. Mom said that the danger was too dangerous for him. He should not leave there under any circumstances. His mother hid him in the looking glass and became the mistress of some aristocrat. And so he grew up, watching her from behind the mirror, seeing how they communicated sweetly and even how he beat her. Then, when he met his mother, the little one asked if maybe he should kill him. But his mother told Seth that he shouldn't do that. She said that he was not a bad person and stroked his cheek. Looking sweetly at her son, all covered in bruises and hematomas, she tenderly said that he was simply trying to get what he wanted. The mother wanted to achieve a lot, but she didn't have the strength, and even when asked why she was crying, she turned everything into joy. This is why she became a mistress. But she even shouted at the aristocrat that he betrayed her. And this dialogue ended badly. She failed, and in the end her death was terrible. All he could do was watch her die right before his eyes, on her bed, beaten to death. People are pathetic. If they don't have strength, they can't achieve anything. That's all he learned from his mother. Seth asked how he thought he lived after her death. If he was only 5 then, he walked through mirrors into other houses and stole food. There were those who pitied him, but then they too turned away, because people hate magicians who have not learned to feel. So hatred built up inside him. He admits that he started helping Alice Rihanna because she reminded him of his mother. But hadn't the world itself taught him to hate people? Why should he care about the value of human life? He asked. He asked Arthur not to talk about good and evil anymore. He would never understand this for the rest of his life. And the hereditary magician didn't even have anything to say in response. He was so devastated by the guy's monologue. But he said that he would leave it and go. He put the envelope on the floor and handed it to the boy. The young man asked what it was and unfolded it, taking out a letter. Instantly his eyebrows rose, but his eyes expressed nothing. It seemed as if he had begun to read the contents of the letter. Then Arthur explained that this was a letter that his mother had sent to their family 10 years ago. She did not have long to live, and she asked them for help. And when they received this letter, they began to look for him. But he was already inside the mirror. He was very sorry that he stopped trusting people. However, he was not abandoned. The boy read that his mother did not want him to live the same miserable life and asked her to take care of him. Goosebumps ran across the boy's skin. He squeezed the letter in his hands a little, and Arthur said that his mother was not weak. She did everything to protect her son. She was a strong woman. Tears flowed from Seth's eyes, and after so many years, he burst into tears. Coming out, Arthur said that he had finished and asked to take care of him. and that all expenses would be covered by the Robert family. The prison guards said that they understood the hereditary magician, and the blond man thanked them with a smile. They said goodbye to him, but as soon as the guy went out into the corridor, the smile disappeared from his face. Empathy and sadness did not leave him. He walked along the corridors and came out into a beautiful garden. The sun was shining outside. Butterflies were flying and the trees were green. Arthur looked straight at the sun, which blinded his eyes, and frowned, thinking sadly that this world was very cruel. At the same time, Logan continued to work tirelessly in his office, but nothing worked out the way he wanted. There was a knock at the door, and the maids came in and told the master that they had brought him food. The man asked if they knew he wasn't having breakfast, and the girl with red hair told the gentleman it was already after 1 o'clock. Logan looked at the table in surprise, raising an eyebrow and asking how much time had passed. There were large bruises under his eyes, and he exhaled tiredly, massaging his forehead, and asked why there was such a noise outside. Another maid reported that today, Mistress Rachel invited her friends for the first time, and that tea was currently being held. Her older brother asked in surprise about his sister's friends, not believing that she had any. The redhead said that it was young Master Robert and Lady Richard, and asked if she should convey his words about the noise to the lady. But the man didn't say anything in response yet. He got up from his chair and went to the window, looking out into the yard. There, along with the others, he noticed Cecilia and, narrowing his eyes, frowned slightly. He told the maids that there was no need for this. They could not worry about him, but return to their business. He would leave now. He would not eat. Hearing the order of their master, the girls bowed to him and said that then they would go. The guy remained looking out the window. The maid said that he had not appeared in the house for several days. It seemed that he was too irritated. The red-haired girl said that after each visit to his room, her life became shorter. They discussed how Mr. Logan was an obedient child as a child. The other one could not imagine this and asked why he had changed so much. A friend told me that when he was not even 12 years old, he was kicked out of the estate, and he returned only 3 years ago, and no one knows what happened to him during that time. The red-haired maid asked if that meant that the rumors were true, that Mr. Logan was the reason Mistress Olivia died. Her friend told her to watch her language. At the same time, Cecilia happily thanked Rachel for the invitation. She was very glad that they were able to come to her. Rachel admitted that Betsy had arranged it all, and when she found out that she had made friends, Arthur called her a wonderful servant. Cecilia said that Nathan couldn't come because of work in the order, but she would eat the treats for him, so she didn't have to be upset. Arthur told his friend that she was always thinking only about food, but she herself said that she ate a lot at lunch. She told her friend menacingly that there are different stomachs for dinner and dessert, and it would be impolite to refuse. Tutu, the guy asked if Rachel could address them informally. Cecilia supported his idea, saying that they were friends after all. The red-haired marquise agreed and said that it would be much more effective for her, and her words would be shorter. Arthur asked, laughing, if this was the only reason. His friend said that by speaking informally, they become even closer. However, Rachel didn't care about this and said that she could do whatever she wanted by voicing her thoughts. When the fair-haired magician asked the girl how Sir Logan was doing, she asked if he meant his brother. Arthur admitted that he tried harder than anyone else in this incident. He was also the one who found the rare minerals. Even his family couldn't do this. This is quite a lot of money, and he is probably dealing with this matter now. He did not expect that the Sir would solve that problem, and even looked at him differently. Rachel thought he was busy with things because of her. Cecilia asked why he was only talking about it now. The guy said that they hadn't seen each other since that day, and his blonde friend said that they didn't even have time to thank him. When Rachel asked Cecilia if she had known Sir Logan before, the girl said that that day at the lake was the first and last time she saw him. And while her friend looked at her in surprise, Rachel continued to eat dessert and thought that he had intervened after all because the incident was connected with Cecilia. At the same time, Logan changed his clothes, threw on his service jacket and raincoat, but before leaving, he couldn't help but notice the candies in the jar. In the blink of an eye, they reminded him of the time when he lived far from home, all alone, and often cried. But then a girl ran up to him. She said that her grandmother bought her some candies. There are 100 bergamot candies, and there is one big one. Leaning towards him, She took out a candy and said that it was unusual and smelled of cinnamon and grapes. This cute little girl with blue and curly hair handed him a candy and said that she would give it to him. Having succumbed to the memory, the now grown-up boy took that same large candy from a jar of the same brand and ate it. After that, he came out of his room, and the man he saw really struck him. But Cecilia did not recognize him, and after greeting him, she smiled and asked if he was Sir Logan. The man looked at his old acquaintance in surprise. He was so surprised that for a moment he was speechless. But quickly coming to his senses, Rachel's older brother said that Sir Logan was him. The girl said she heard he was very helpful with the recent incident. She didn't have a chance to thank him properly. The guy replied that it was about his sister, and said that there was no need to thank him. And yet now she owed a lot to their family, the girl said. But without letting her finish, Logan said that it was time for him to go. And yes, he just walked past. Cecilia thought, what's the matter? She didn't finish, but he just left. Suddenly, the girl caught a painfully familiar scent that appeared only when the guy walked past her. She turned around in surprise. She knew what that smell was. It smelled like bergamot from those same candies. And remembering the moment when she shared the candy with that boy, she called out to the guy. Logan turned around in surprise and asked what was going on. The girl, whose hair was shining in the light, looked at the guy with her blue eyes and asked if they had met him before. To which the blue-eyed brunette and leader of the Knightly Order firmly said that they had not seen each other, and after that left. Cecilia pouted and thought he was cute but cold. Not her type in general. But that boy was very affectionate and gentle. He certainly couldn't grow up to be such a cold person, she thought. At the same time, the guys on the training ground were discussing that the commander had not come and had not rested for 3 years after being appointed to the position. But they can rest. The green-haired knight said that the guards of the imperial palace were redistributed. Another said that although Chloe's family was on good terms with them, this time they had changed absolutely everyone. Without distinction, Nathan asked why. One of his comrades suggested that it was to make an impression. Another replied that there were rumors that he might become related to the emperor's relatives. Suddenly, the men heard footsteps behind them, and then a voice called out to them. The knights immediately realized that it was the commander. Marquis Logan Chloe coldly asked them what they were doing during working hours. The green-haired knight asked the commander if he had arrived yet. Nathan said that they thought he would not come to duty today. The guy said in surprise that they were supposed to be training at that time, and asked if they had thought that they could do nothing in his absence. In response, the third knight said that his assistant said that he could rest today. Logan asked, "So what did he get out of it?" And the next moment the three headed to training. Nathan excitedly said that he had no objections. Entering the office, Logan asked what this meant. Not only had he freed his charges from all duties, but he was also playing cards. Tyler asked if he thought it was too much. How could a person work so much? Everyone needs rest and entertainment as well. Logan asked with displeasure if that was why he had set up a card club here, and the assistant replied that it was a way to keep up their morale. Tyler also asked what was going on with the incident. He knew it was related to Rachel, but Seth was only 15 and he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. The commander of the order said that this happened in the imperial palace. In this case, the punishment fits the crime, and asked about other incidents. Tyler said that speaking of the Ravens, there have been suspicious events where the Backwoods Guild is likely the key figure, but no connection with the mages has been noticed. He reported that the group of magicians was completely destroyed after that incident, and asked why he thought they were connected. Logan replied that he didn't need to know that, and told him to continue surveillance and focus on his duties. Tyler noticed that he seemed to dislike magicians, and had a dislike for Arthur Robert as well, and asked why he was so tense. In response, the head of the Knightly Order clenched his fist and said that he had no reason to love them. Magicians are the scum of society. This answer almost knocked the assistant chief's legs out of joint. His eyes widened and his head went blank. He asked sadly about Rachel, but was suddenly interrupted by another voice, which shouted to the commander and him that dinner was ready. Tyler decided not to dwell on it, and said that they would talk about it another time, and asked if he had had dinner yet. Logan said he didn't want to, and told the assistant to eat and come. Tyler reminded that they were working for the common good. And they won't thank them for it, and it doesn't seem like all these documents are related to the order. Logan said that it looks like he doesn't have enough work. Tyler immediately understood his brother-in-law's hint and anxiously said that he better go. The knight who burst into the room apologized to the commander. As Tyler stepped outside the door, he said that he was impenetrable, just like his sister. And the knight asked in surprise if the commander had a sister. Her fiancé, smiling, answered his friend that she was there and that she looked very much like her brother. The sun was already setting, and the guy's office was already illuminated by its rays. But he continued to work with documents. Suddenly, he remembered what had happened at home, how he had met Cecilia, and putting down his pen, he exhaled heavily. He thought that it was not yet time to get closer to her. He still had his own things to do. Then he remembered that during his wanderings, when he was thrown out of his home, he sat crying in the rain. A red-haired man with bright red eyes looked down at him menacingly, and then lightning struck. Betsy woke up her mistress and said that she was planning to go somewhere today. The little girl woke up and told her maid that she had to be at Tyler's house for lunch and asked for 10 more minutes. Hearing the words about lunch, the blue-eyed brunette excitedly said that then she had to get ready quickly, otherwise she would be late. She carefully told the girl to get up quickly. Rachel sat on the bed, but did not open her eyes yet. Then Betsy even gave her water. While already combing her mistress's hair, the maid said that she was already 16, which meant that she was gradually growing up and that she should continue to behave exactly the same in the groom's house. If any person talks a lot, this is a manifestation of concern, so as not to create an awkward silence, and I asked not to perceive this as importunity. She also said not to forget to thank everyone. Rachel asked to stop. She already understood everything. She liked everything about her, except for the moralizing. The personal maid seemed to remind herself that she was talking about obvious things and that she could handle it just fine herself. And then I asked her what she thought about using the escort of guards. Rachel asked why she needed them. She may be worrying for nothing, but the streets have not been safe lately, Betsy said. And Sophia, with whom she lives, told her about the missing little girls. They disappear without a trace. The maid said that they are possibly kidnapped, and she always travels alone, while the others travel with guards. The Marquise said that she didn't need them, especially since all this was happening to commoners. Angrily, Betsy said there was no harm in being careful and asked if she should go with her. The lady said she didn't look scary. The maid replied that it was still better when someone was nearby. At the same time she could be a companion on the road. Rachel told her to rest at home. Then Betsy decided to confess that she wanted to ask her for permission and asked if she could go home while the lady was visiting. Rachel looked at her personal maid in surprise and asked why she was going home. Then the girl confessed that her sister was sick and she wanted to buy her medicine and return in the evening. The Marquise said that she did not have to go out with her. She could ask her about such things at any time. Betsy's eyes sparkled and her cheeks turned red. She thanked him joyfully and said that he would definitely be here until she returned. At the same time, the lady gave instructions to the maids regarding the selection of music, dishes, desserts, and tea. Tyler asked if all the fuss was just about a regular lunch. She couldn't overexert herself in her condition. The girl said that they would see his bride for the first time. Naturally, she should take care of everything. She was very happy about the appearance of another girl in their house. The lady enthusiastically asked what kind of person Lady Rachel was. If she was a refined and elegant lady, they could find a common hobby. And if she likes something elegant, it would be nice to do embroidery or floristry together, she said. The girl hoped that they would become friends and become like sisters. The young man told her not to have high hopes with such a description. As a friend announced to the lady that Lady Rachel Chloe had arrived, the girl came closer and greeted her. The guy met his bride with a joyful expression on his face and asked her if she had already arrived. He introduced his fiancée Rachel Chloe to the lady, and the girl covered her mouth with her hand in happiness. She couldn't believe that this lovely sweet girl was Tyler's fiancée. It felt like she was getting a little sister. Tyler introduced her as his brother's wife, but the girl introduced herself as Maria Roderick, Adam's wife and the mistress of the estate. She said that there was very little time left before the birth. She thought it would be better to get to know each other as soon as possible and apologized for the suddenness. The young man, scratching the back of his head, said that his brother was also supposed to be present, but the Countess wanted to see her as soon as possible, and his brother had gone away on business. Maria said that she, as the hostess, should have taken care of this in advance. But she herself recently found out that Tyler has such a lovely bride. Their men are so slow. The Countess continued to speak enthusiastically about them when Tyler asked if she would stand there like that. Otherwise, her brother would scold him later. The girl, smiling guiltily, pressed her hand to her cheek and said that she was so happy that she completely forgot herself and invited everyone to the table. Maria said that she married Adam 5 years ago. They had been friends since childhood, and she had known Tyler since he was little. He was always running after her and calling her sister, and now he has become so mature and sweet, it embarrassed the guy. And the Countess continued saying that she could ask anything about Tyler. She even knew his dark sides. And she said that as a child, he loved to play pranks and was always causing trouble. When they found out that he was the assistant to the head of the order, they thought that some mistake had occurred. And although Rachel pretended to listen attentively to the stories, she herself thought that she didn't ask anything, but that she herself was telling everything. Suddenly, she remembered Betsy's words about how a person can talk a lot and realized that this is caring. She voiced her guesses out loud, and Countess Maria and Tyler asked in surprise what she had just said. Then Rachel asked Countess Maria Roderick why she cared about her, and in response, the girl smiled sweetly at her. She seemed to be glowing with happiness and said that it was because they would soon become a family. Rachel was very interested in this word family. She wondered what it could mean, and in the meantime, the dinner went on. After dinner, Tyler took his bride home and told her that today was fun. But she was probably embarrassed because of the Countess and thanked her for accepting his care. Rachel, getting out of the carriage, thanked him for seeing her off, and the guy asked, "What about the accompanying nights? One thing is still dangerous." The girl said that Betsy also talked about this, and the guy advised her to listen to the words of the maid. She is the closest person to her. And then he happily said that when the baby is born, she can come visit, and then she will be able to see her brother. "Okay," Rachel said to Chloe as she approached the gate, turned to her fiancé, and said goodbye to him. He said under his breath that she hadn't even turned around properly and wondered why he suddenly felt sorry. At the same time, the red-haired marquise had already entered her room and, turning to Betsy, said that she had returned. As she said, she introduced herself and then thanked her for her concern. But as she walked deeper into the room, she realized that she was not answering her. Rachel thought that she was late, even though she had promised to return before her arrival, and falling on the bed, she said that she would have to scold her tomorrow. But as soon as she closed her eyes, she was again overcome with an anxious feeling and thoughts about her family. She wondered what this meant. One morning, she asked what was going on. The girl bowed and introduced herself as Catherine, and said that from that day on, she would be serving her. Rachel crossed her arms over her chest and asked, "So suddenly, who decided this?" The girl explained that Betsy had been missing for 3 days, so they sent her to work instead. The marquise, frowning, said that she herself had allowed Betsy to leave. Raising her eyebrows, Catherine said that she had been gone for 3 days, so the headmaid had fired her. Rachel frowned and asked, "So it was the headmaid who arranged everything?" The atmosphere became dark. At the same time, the headmaid was screaming at them to shut up. She couldn't trust people like them. She claimed that Betsy had taken the master's goods and run away. Her friend clasped her hands together, crying, and told Madame that she didn't think so, that Betsy couldn't have done such a thing. The maid told her to stop and get down to business, and after cleaning, check if anything valuable was missing. The girl asked for Betsy's return a little more. Madame was shouting at her to shut up and was almost threatening her when Rachel came up and asked why it was so noisy. Madame immediately turned her attention to the mistress and worriedly apologized and explained that she was raising a young servant. He would soon figure it out. The red-haired marchioness asked her questioningly and sullenly whether she should tell her what she had said about Betsy stealing something. The maid said that she had not returned for 3 days already, and this means that she stole something and ran away. Otherwise, it cannot be explained. Then Rachel asked if she had any proof. Madame apologized for saying that, but Betsy and Sophia came from a dark alley. She said that she probably doesn't know, but such people are born like rats and are prone to stealing. And they took them to work as maids. She was worried. The new maid was much more educated and more suitable for her. Rachel ordered her to be quiet and explained to the loud madam that she liked Betsy and didn't need anyone else. Madame again shouted and told the lady that she simply did not know this world and that there was no escape from her innate qualities. You shouldn't hang out with people from the slums, she said. And if that's the case, it would be better to kick out everyone who comes from there. Sophia asked the lady to believe that Betsy was not like that at all, that she loved her very much and was not capable of stealing. But the very next moment, the head maid pulled out a wet rag and buckets and threw them at her, shouting orders to shut up and asking who gave her the right to open her mouth. The head maid yelled at her, telling her to know her place and treated her like a dirty creature, Sophia cried. Rachel turned to Madame, but she told the lady that she would throw her out at once. But the Marchioness took a bucket of dirty water and threw the contents on her. The Marchioness told her not to make her repeat herself and said again that she liked Betsy and did not need others. And holding the bucket in her hands, she looked menacingly at the head servant and said that this was payment for the insults directed at her. Madame asked how the mistress could treat her like this when she had served faithfully in this house for 15 years. It was she who took care of the house while the mistress was away. Rachel gave her a cold look and asked, "And what of it?" She asked if she meant by this that she, a servant, was of higher status than her. The lady said worriedly that this was not the case, and realizing that she was driving herself into a dead end, she bowed her head. She apologized to the lady and said that she was wrong. Turning away, Rachel said that it was good that she understood this. Suddenly, she stopped and turned halfway around and looked at her and said that it was too dirty here and ordered her to clean everything up personally. All the junior maids present were in shock, and Madame's blood vessels burst from anger. And, clenching her fists, she said, "Okay." When Rachel turned to Sophia, the girl in the guard shuddered and asked what was wrong. Then the red-haired marquise told her to follow her. She needed to talk to her. And having arrived in the room, Rachel sat down on the bed, and Sophia thanked the lady for helping her. With her hands folded under her chest, youngest daughter Chloe said it wasn't help. She just wanted to ask something. Betsy's friend with pigtails and freckles said enthusiastically that she could ask whatever she wanted. Then she asked why everyone was saying she was missing. Betsy had gone to visit her relatives. Maybe she was looking after her family. The girl with pink eyes said that she and Betsy lived in an orphanage, and she calls the children from there her younger brothers and sisters. She asked at the shelter about her. It turns out she left it that day. She was worried. So she told the head maid. And this is what happened. She knew that she didn't like them. She didn't think that everything would turn out like this. Rachel said that she didn't call her to clarify things. She asked Sophia what common people usually do if someone goes missing, and the girl replied that they first write a statement. Then, Rachel said, they would go there right away. The maid asked if she would go there herself. The marquise did not give an answer, but asked if she knew the closest detachment to the shelter. Sophia nodded. Then, Rachel took a small knife from under her pillow and, turning to the maid, told her to take her there. She said that aristocrats usually don't go into such dangerous areas, and this is the one that the 5th squad is responsible for. Once inside, the girl said that they were looking for a girl under 20 with brown hair and blue eyes. The man asked how he knew. Sophia asked how one could remain calm when a person had disappeared. The man asked if they thought orphans were rare in the area and advised them to find a new maid. Rachel frowned and looked at him seriously, asking if he was saying that people often go missing here. Leaning back in his chair, he said that maybe they didn't know there was such a neighborhood here. No one cares what disappeared or who came back here. The marquise asked why she was not taking any measures to find people. The man said that there was no reaction to their reports to the order. These words about the order became a clue for Rachel, and she asked if this meant that he had to report everything to the order. The next moment, he hit the table hard and said with displeasure that this was all they could do. His unshaven and aging face was frowning, and he said with displeasure that they were simply following orders from their superiors. Everyone knows that orphans in these parts are the illegitimate children of high-ranking lords. Perhaps she was lucky that she was taken into a good home. But her fate did not change from this. Sophia felt unpleasant, and she suggested that the lady leave. Rachel looked at the man again, and turning away, but not taking her eyes off him, she said that if the whole problem was in the order, then she would go there herself. The man asked where she was going. They don't let just anyone in there. He thinks they'll start stirring because some servant has gone missing. Walking to the door, Rachel said that it was no longer his concern and called Sophia. The girl asked the lady to wait. The next moment, the door slammed loudly, and the man could not believe that the girl ignored his words. Sophia ran after the marquise and asked if she was personally going to the order, but she could see Mr. Logan at home. Rachel asked why she suddenly started talking about her brother and told the girl to return to the estate. The maid asked what she was going to do alone. The mistress replied that she was going to first reproach them for their negligence and check something. Continuing on, Rachel said that she was bothering her and told her to just go home and not to worry. She would find Betsy soon. The maid looked after her in surprise and said under her breath that she thought she was a cold and harsh person. She said enthusiastically that their mistress was so amazing. Now she understood why Betsy loved her so much. Men asked whether it was not absurd that the romance of the knightly order was largely a fiction of novels. Tyler replied wearily that there were no wars in this country, and so they were forced to deal with paperwork. But nothing can be done, his comrade said, because the order receives reports from all 8 guard posts throughout the capital. Tyler said that he could no longer write more than 3 lines on this topic. Assistants to the head of the order should be chosen based on their ability to work with documents. The guy with dirty pink hair said that if it weren't for the affairs of the imperial palace, there would be much less paperwork. The guy with the bobblehead asked if it was too much that they also had to provide security for events organized by the emperor's relatives. Tyler said he has no authority. He has to do what he is told. The real problem is the hard work and honesty of the head of the order, which does not give them a break. But he himself works harder than anyone else. Yesterday even he didn't sleep all night, sitting over documents. Suddenly, the door opened and Logan entered the room, asking why the report on the guard squad was not ready yet. All 3 of them jumped up from their seats and said in unison how unexpected it was. Their commander, frowning, reminded them that he had asked why the report was not ready yet. The young man with dirty pink hair was on edge and said that he would find it now and bring it to him. After a while, the guy started moaning about what he should do, so Tyler asked what happened. The young man explained that there had been no report from the 5th detachment for about 3 months. He had already checked 10 times, but did not understand where it had gone. First, I'll have to give the report in this form, the guy with the square asked. Maybe everything will be fine. Maybe he won't notice just one report. The assistant to the heads, rolling his eyes at the hopelessness of their situation, said that he doubted it. By that time, Rachel had also approached the building of the knightly order, but she was walking in circles. The men were discussing what the lady was doing there. Then Nathan ran up to the men and asked what was going on. The bald man asked his friend, pinching the baby on the cheek, if maybe this was his daughter. As a friend, a guy with blue hair suddenly put his hands on the wall and asked what she was doing there. The hair on his head stood on end, and the dark-skinned blonde asked Nathan what was going on. Rachel turned around at the noise. And seeing her friend on the wall, the red-haired marquise said that they had not seen each other for a long time. The men hugged the guy and asked if he knew her and if she was his girlfriend. Nathan looked ahead in surprise, and he said to his fellow soldiers, looking at the marquise sparkling in the sun, that this was the commander's younger sister. The men instantly tore themselves away from him. They were in shock, but said that they understood. And the young man raised an eyebrow and asked why she had come here. Waving to his friend, he told Rachel that he would be right down, and his comrades decided to leave immediately. Rachel looked at him in surprise, but nodded her head, running up to her friend Nathan to ask what brought her here. The girl replied that she wanted to meet with one of the leaders of the order. Her subordinates were working too poorly. Scratching the back of his head, the guy asked, "With the leader of the order, did she mean Sir Tyler, or did she come as the commander's sister?" He didn't ask, or because he missed the head's assistant. That's not the point. The girl said that, of course not. The girl asked what the head's sister meant, but in response, Nathan raised an eyebrow and said to just follow him, and he would take her there. At the same time, the guys brought a report on security. Looking at the sheet, Logan asked if this was really a report for 3 months. That's right, the guy with blonde hair answered. The head of the order noted that the volume had decreased significantly since last time. The young man with pink hair was about to confess, when suddenly Nathan entered the room with a girl and told the commander that Rachel had come to see him. The man looked towards the entrance with displeasure and asked why he had come. Tyler saw his daughter-in-law and asked Rachel, and her older brother asked worriedly what she was doing there. At the same time, the Marquis asked what he was doing there. Nathan said that he was the head of the Imperial Knightly Order. The girl looked at her friend with surprise and disbelief, and he asked if she really didn't know that Sir Logan was his leader. Tyler was surprised and told his brother-in-law that they didn't communicate enough. They must have been close as children, and asked how it happened. Squeezing her forearm, Rachel looked at the floor with irritation and sadness and said that they had never been close and that her brother didn't like her. Logan stood up and said that they didn't need to worry about other people's family matters and asked Rachel what happened. The girl explained that her maid had gone missing, so she turned to the guards, but they didn't even try to listen to her. Logan came closer and frowned, asking if her personal maid was missing and what she said about the guards. The red-haired younger sister said that this was the 5th squad. Tyler asked in surprise. She was there too. His comrade said that this squad is responsible for the street where the gang of crows is in charge. Tyler said that no one wants to work there. Rachel said she heard there had been a lot of girls going missing there lately. They told her. They reported to the top, but no orders were received, and it turned out that the top was her brother. Logan told his sister that this was the first he had heard of this, and, after leafing through the papers, asked where the 5th squad's report had gone. The young man confessed that he had disappeared, and that they had accumulated a lot of business related to the Imperial Palace. They didn't have time to fill out the security paperwork for the districts. Tyler said it was his fault. He would personally go to the 5th squad. Having laid out the documents on the table, Logan asked Rachel if it turned out that her maid had disappeared in the area for which the 5th squad was responsible. And most likely, she was kidnapped. Rachel said that was the case. Logan added that there was a chance that it was not a kidnapping. This is not the first time this has happened. An investigation needs to be conducted. It is unknown what may happen if measures are not taken in time. The guys assumed that it was a gang of crows. First, they needed to add them as suspects. But for the Raven Gang, the deli is their property, they said, and the girl was hooked by the name of the gang. They can't just show up without evidence either. But that's even better. They'll be able to sort out the security issue in that alley. Logan told Tyler and Nathan to deal with the missing Squad 5 report while he gathered the knights and went to the Raven Gang. Suddenly, a knight knocked on the door of the room and told the commander that a man from Sergio's estate had arrived. A gray-haired man with a bundle in his hand said that it would not be possible to gather military forces now. Logan asked who he was. The man pointed to himself and said that he came from the heads of the Sergio clan, that Duke is the uncle of the Crown Prince. The head of the order asked why the Emperor's relatives were interfering in the affairs of the knightly order. The man said that some missing vagabonds were not the most important thing right now. There was a banquet tonight. They should be there. Angrily, Logan said that it seemed that the Emperor's relatives considered their detachment to be their personal guard and ordered him to return from where he came. The man frowned indignantly and wrinkled his nose, saying, "What kind of rudeness is this? The knights discussed the Duke's daughter planning to marry the commander, but how could they be treated so rudely?" The man said that Duke Sergio had said that he must be present, and that the gathering of the knights could be postponed until later. Logan calmly said that he would send his subordinate there, and the right to gather the knights belonged to him, and asked not to interfere. The gray-haired ambassador said that he must come in person and submitted a written request from the Imperial Palace. Raising the paper up, he asked, he was not going to go against the Emperor's order itself. Sir Logan's boiling point was already reaching Chloe's limit. It seemed that he was about to explode with anger and asked if he was looking for a conflict. Noticing this, Tyler, cooling the ardor of the disputants, said that they understood everything. He could leave it to them and go. Now they were having a meeting. The man left, and Tyler slapped himself in the face, reminding him that recklessness would not lead to good results, and asked what he was going to do next. Logan looked around the room and said that first they needed to find out where the 5th Squad's report had gone and prepare to go to the gang of ravens. The knights said that they obeyed, and Nathan asked what would happen then if he did not obey the Emperor's order. The leader of the Imperial detachment said that he would go there right away and resolve the issue, and told them to take action. The guys scattered in different directions, and Tyler turned to the entrance and addressed Rachel, telling her to go home. But before he could finish speaking, he tilted his head to the side and called the girl again. He did not understand what she was doing. His commander told his assistant that she probably just went home, to which, in response to his brother-in-law, he turned his head towards the entrance to the office and grinned. He said he didn't think so, but he apparently didn't know his sister well. The girl was already heading towards that alley. She thought that this could be the work of a gang of ravens. Before returning to the past, she seemed to have already heard about them. Rachel began to remember how she knew about them and thoughtfully stopped in place. But she continued walking with thoughts that if she didn't remember, it meant that they weren't that important. But first, they needed to be found. Here she stopped the man by pulling him by the sleeve and asked if he knew where the gang of ravens was. The man looked at the red-haired girl in surprise and said that he didn't know. She said that she had heard it was a fairly well-known gang, and realizing that she wouldn't get anything out of him, she said that it would be faster to go there herself so that they could kidnap her and thank him for his help. The man looked at the girl and asked what it was, what the lady was talking about. Walking down the dark street, Rachel thought that if she walked here leisurely, she would be noticed and kidnapped, and she walked past the old man. Then the grandfather turned around and said that he was seeing her in this alley for the first time and asked if she was lost. He said that if he needed directions, he could call her. Rachel turned around and said that she had business there. The old man asked if it was such a gloomy place. It was not safe here, and advised it would be better to leave. However, Rachel went further and told him to go his own way, and she had her own plans. The old man was surprised. The bald and unshaven old man smiled and said that he hoped nothing would happen to her. She was so cold, but he only warned her of the danger. Suddenly, the Marquise turned around and asked her grandfather if he by any chance knew about the gang of crows. The man froze, his eyes widened in surprise, and he himself turned cold, but laughing, he asked what it was. At that very moment, Rachel tensed up. She was wondering where she had heard that nasty laugh. And now, I remembered this old man, and the gang of crows themselves. They carried out their dark deeds on 5th Street. The old man asked why she was asking about the gang of ravens, and the Marquise replied that she thought he knew best. The man's gaze became dangerous, and the aura around him became alarming, and he asked if she knew who he was and wasn't afraid of him. Rachel asked if she should be afraid. He's just an ordinary old man who's obsessed with money. The intimidating grandfather asked how such a sweet girl knew the details of the detachment from the dark alley. The girl raised her eyebrows slightly and said that it was quite possible that they knew each other. Rachel thought he was one of the people she killed in the past. He was just lucky that she came back, and now he wouldn't die. She looked down at the floor and thought, if you think about it, she was saving the lives of many people. At that very moment, the grandfather was walking in it, and smiling in her face, said that it was strange, but he didn't remember her. He went completely mad and said that her face seemed familiar to him because her eyes were the look of a killer. The old man, with the same creepy smiling expression on his face, said that she looked very much like a person he knew. She asked if the children's disappearance was their doing. She knew he was obsessed with money. The man asked about the disappearance, and Rachel explained that they had kidnapped his maid as well. At that moment, other gang members had already started to gather behind her, and then one of them hit her in the neck from behind. And now she was lying unconscious on the stone floor of the streets, and 4 men were looking at her. The blue-eyed old man said that there was nothing more stupid than the lack of fear in such a dark place. At the same time, the Knights of the Order were sorting out the report with the man. He said that he had reported everything. Nathan said that he was repeating the same thing, and showing the sheet asked if he was saying that this was the whole report, or if he was trying to deceive them. The man asked how many times he had to repeat that this was all he had, that he knew nothing about any omissions. Nathan concluded that he had been bribed and asked what they would do. Tyler was already heading towards them, and while the man was talking, something about them and their order made him shut up only when the guy hit the table. The man said with alarm that he had scared him and asked what he was. The brunette looked at him attentively, frowning. However, the next moment, he relaxed his face and, smiling broadly, turned to the little one and offered to talk in person. The guy thought that 10 minutes had already passed and wondered what they were talking about, whether the way to solve the problem through conversation was too simple. Nathan said that he didn't seem to know how such a simple-minded and cheerful man had risen to the rank of assistant to the head of the order. The comrade admitted that, in fact, he always thought it was a little strange. If the commander is a very straightforward person, then Tyler is resourceful and flexible. Such a person is important to the commander. You can't blindly trust a smiling person. At first glance, he is carefree, but in fact, he knows how to find the best solution. The man bowed to the floor and asked to forgive him. He sees right through a person and pressures them until he gets what he wants. Tyler ordered him to tell what was going on. That's Sir Tyler. The trembling man raised his head in horror and said that it would be better if it was an ordinary gang like the Raven Squad. The guy tilted his head to the side and, drawing his eyebrows together, asked in a pressing tone, "If it wasn't them, then who?" The man, looking at the dark silhouette that blocked the rays of light, said that they were cruelly killing people with the help of magic. Tyler's eyes widened, and the man whose face responded to the sunlight screamed in horror that they were very dangerous magicians. However, not much time passed, and Rachel opened her eyes lying on the floor in a huge cage. She sat up and clutched the back of her head, thinking that the old man had been mean and had hit her from behind. Looking around, she realized that it looked like their lair. She was pleased with herself because she was kidnapped, just like Betsy. But she was worried about why there were no other children here, when suddenly the bag next to her shook and made a sound. She turned sharply in his direction and raised an eyebrow in bewilderment, asking something like that. She pulled out of the bag and unglued the mouth of a man with gray-green hair, who, sneezing, thanked him for his help. He continued to sneeze and complain about dust allergies and untied his hands. Rachel asked who he was. The guy in glasses said that his name was Kevin, and again thanked the girl for freeing him. However, while climbing out of the bag, he fell awkwardly and, raising his head, said that he already thought that he would die in this bag. The red-haired marquise, frowning and raising her eyebrows at the same time, looked at this misunderstanding and asked how he was caught. While removing the tape from his mouth, he said that he had lost his sister, and then he began looking for her, asking people, and eventually he was kidnapped. Rachel asked, and she told him that she, too, was looking for the missing maid. And then I found out about the Raven Gang. Kevin said that he initially thought so too, but it seems that it was not about the Raven Gang. He thoughtfully explained that he had overheard a conversation, and it seemed that the children who were in the gang had also disappeared. They said they were sold at a slave auction. Rachel asked in surprise and stuttered, "So they were sold?" Then the man frowned and said, "It looks like the criminal is involved in human trafficking." Goosebumps ran across her skin after these words. She was worried that if they didn't find them quickly, the same fate awaited them. The man confirmed that they would be sold. There were no ethnic norms for those people. Rachel asked if he had heard about the criminal. Kevin said that here they are called the Dark Brotherhood, when suddenly a bald old man entered the room and asked how they woke up. The red-haired marquise turned her head in his direction with displeasure and thought that it was that damn old man again. He said that she seemed to be from a wealthy family and apologized for bringing her to such a humble place. She asked why they needed her. The man, half of whose face was illuminated by the light, said that they were also suffering losses because of them. They had seized the children who worked for them. The man swore under his breath and said that they should have gotten rid of them right away. They barely survived as it was. The old man asked if they shouldn't benefit too. Rachel asked what would happen next. He went mad again and said that they needed others for sale. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. They would sell the magician. "What does this mean?" the little girl asked, turning cold. A chill ran across her skin, and she felt somehow uneasy. The old man said that you can get much more for the magician. Rachel took out a knife and asked how the bandits could defeat the magician. The next moment she cut her finger, but the magic she had just created instantly returned to her and dissipated. At this point, she became alarmed. Looking at the bloody finger and the knife, she realized that she could not use magic. The old man said that it was useless. This dungeon was specially created for magicians, and tomorrow they would be put up for sale. He said to sit and wait for their fate, and they would sell their maid today, and they would never see each other again. Rachel, holding onto the bars, asked what he was talking about, and irritably ordered him to stop. The magic couldn't be used. Then Kevin raised an eyebrow and said in a relaxed tone that nothing would help. He had also tried several times, and nothing worked. Clutching his head, he asked, crying, if his sister would really be sold tonight. What should they do? He was sure that they would sell her and do something terrible to her. Rachel angrily told him to sit quietly. She could not concentrate. What should she do, she thought, and grabbing her knife tighter, she struck it hard into the keyhole, but the blade broke. Kevin kept whining about what would happen to his sister. He couldn't just let go of his Alice. Rachel was very irritated by her cellmate's behavior, and she turned around and told him to be quiet. The guy finally closed his mouth and squeezed it with both hands for complete confidence. The Marquise exhaled tiredly. Suddenly, she heard some conversations and shared this with Kevin, walking towards the sound. The guy in glasses asked her what those sounds were, and when she approached the grate, she said that they were behind that wall, and then she saw a crack. After that, she came up with a plan. She lifted the blade of her knife and looked at both parts that she held in her hands. The next moment, she threw the tip of the blade into that gap. It hit the target right on target, making the gap bigger. Now, she definitely had to put the rest of the knife inside herself, and the next moment, she confidently threw the broken knife into the hole. And it's true, but it flew straight and right on target, cutting through the air and almost hitting the red-haired man with red eyes. The man looked at the knife curled up next to him and discovered from the pain that the attack from behind the wall had cut his ear. The guys in black robes sitting next to him asked worriedly if he was okay. A knife had just come through the door. They were talking and wondering who dared to attack the boss. The man was wiping blood from his ear. The next moment, the red-haired magician stood up from his seat and, walking around the wooden counter, began to read the spell. A moment later, the wall collapsed, and behind it, the magician saw a room with a cage, from which a guy and a girl looked at him in fear and menacingly. He came closer to the peculiar prison, and holding out the knife that had flown into him, asked the guy if it was his. The long-haired guy with glasses raised his hands to his chest and said worriedly that the knife was not his. Then the man turned his gaze to the little red-haired girl who was standing nearby. Rachel looked back at him with her apple-green eyes, without any strong expression of emotion. In response, the man grinned and, closing his eyes in approval, said that she was quite impudent. The Marquise asked her to help them. The magician asked her tensely if she knew that her knife almost hit him in the face. The girl replied that she knew it. The man asked what she wanted him to do. Rachel said that he saw that they were locked in and seemed to be a magician. And since this is so, he can help them get out of here. The man asked if this was an order, and the Marquise, squeezing the rod, said that it was a request. The red-haired man with red eyes and controlling blood magic carefully examined his literal copy with green eyes. He let them go, and the girl said that it didn't look like the boss. He didn't even know who locked them there, but he wanted to save them. His subordinate asked if this would cause any unnecessary trouble, and their leader replied that he thought everything would be fine. But he himself, in turn, watched the red-haired girl whom he had just let go. He remembered how the little girl had said that it was just a request, but in his mind he saw his green-eyed, white-haired lover speaking in exactly the same way. And although he thought that she could be his daughter, because she looked very much like her, he turned away and said that first they had to figure it out. He walked into the room that was further from the cage and entered it, kicking down the door. The bald old man shuddered in surprise and, looking at the boss in bewilderment, asked what he was doing here. The red-haired magician told his grandfather that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he didn't even know that he was doing this behind his back. The old man looked at him tremblingly and asked in fear what he was talking about. The magician said that it turns out there is a dungeon where magic does not work. They say there are people who sell magicians. The old man walked away from the frightening man in horror and asked how this was possible. They would never do such a thing. The red-haired man continued to look at him coldly, and then the grandfather bowed and asked him to forgive him and just not kill him. But the next moment, the man used his magic to turn him into a stone statue. The man grinned and asked the crumbling statue if he had asked not to kill him, and said that he shouldn't have done that then. Kevin said it was good that there was a magician nearby. The atmosphere was not good, and asked who these people were. Rachel asked why he was interested, since it was more important to find Betsy now, and thought that the man was unpleasant. She said that she thought the auction would take place tonight. The guy asked if it wouldn't be better to tell the knights and ask for help. The red-haired Marquise looked at the moon and said that the sun had already set. They didn't have time for this. The guy said that they also didn't know anything. It seemed like it was some kind of dark organization. His magic wasn't for attacks, and it couldn't handle it alone. The girl said that the knights could not help. They went to the reception. Kevin asked if they were going to the reception like the other people and pointed at the couple in masks. Seeing a couple in suits nearby, Rachel winced and said that they should follow them. "Why suddenly?" the guy asked. The girl answered that it was strange that the reception was taking place in such a slum. It dawned on the man that the guests certainly didn't want to be noticed. He asked if it would not be better to ask the knights for help. He repeated that his magic was not capable of attack. Rachel flinched at his words and stopped in her tracks. Using the blood from her finger, she began to cast a spell. The next moment, the couple who were going to the auction froze like stone statues. The man witnessed the magic of transformation. The girl said that the magic was quite weak and quickly dissipated. They needed to hurry. Kevin said that the lady had extraordinary abilities and ran after her. When they arrived, they stood in line, and the guy looking out said that they were handing out license plates at the entrance. This was probably the right place. He happily said that it was good that he had taken the invitation with him and had managed to change into a nice outfit. Rachel said they weren't there to have fun, and the guy admitted he was a little surprised. He'd heard that magic like that was hard to handle. Looking away, the little girl admitted that she still can't use it freely due to her young age. Then Kevin became inspired and, becoming interested, asked how old she was, and she replied that she was 16. He told his companion that she was about the same age as his master and told him what a generous man he was. The girl told him to be quiet. Their turn was close. The man said he would check their invitation. Kevin handed over the sheet. Rachel watched with interest as the man went about his duties. How he tensed up, shifting his gaze from the invitation to her. He saw that she was a child. Then, doubting the authenticity of the invitation, he asked if she was Lady Marin Rothstein, to which Rachel coldly replied that it wasn't her, and Kevin flinched in fear. And hugging her, he said that his third wife could not come, and that she was his mistress. He apologized for using his wife's name and asked for understanding. The man who checked their invitation looked at them incredulously and asked if he was Duke Jake Rothstein. Kevin said it was him and asked if there was a problem. The man thought he was still as nasty a person as they say and gave him the number. He happily snatched it and thanked it, and when he walked away, he almost burst into tears from fear, and Rachel asked if his words were true. He said that he didn't care. Meanwhile, the host had already welcomed the gentlemen and ladies to their auction and asked for forgiveness for the wait. Kevin was surprised by the number of participants and asked why they were doing this. The girl replied that she didn't understand either, but it was just fun. She said that the higher the status, the more they want to satisfy their desires. They feel freedom, breaking the law. The man was amazed by such statements and told the lady that she was very smart for her age. Rachel said it was pointless to think that humans were morally superior to wizards. They pretended to be noble on the outside, but secretly they enjoyed buying and selling people. However, Kevin replied that he believed that every person was good at heart, whether they were a wizard or not. So, smiling, he told his new lady friend that she was no exception. The red-haired Marquise tensed up and asked the guy with glasses why he was telling her this. Kevin said they were falling like that and offered to go out first. Rachel said the auction was being held here. The guy said that they should secretly save them before they were sold, and she asked, "They only need to save 2 girls." He laughed nervously in response and asked how they could only save their own people. Looking around the corner, he said that the children of the branch could also be in danger. He could not close his eyes to this for reasons of conscience. She asked if this meant he was going to save the rest of the children too. She thought it was too big of a deal. But the young man did not listen to her. They walked even further, and around a new corner he saw security, which he told his companion about. And pushing the lady to say she could do it, Rachel asked in shock if he had any conscience at all. But she still knocked out the men, and Kevin happily said that he knew she could be relied on. And so they went into the room. It was very dark and cramped, and Rachel asked Betsy if she was there. He said he saw something that looked like iron bars and assumed that this was the right place. In an instant, he cast a spell and created a magic ball that illuminated the room. Rachel thoughtfully said that it was definitely magic. Kevin replied that it was not intended for such purposes. The young man with the ponytail took off his mask and, raising his golden eyes, looked around. Tied-up girls looked down on them from above and from various grates placed around the room. Looking around, Rachel also took off her mask and said that this whole place was terrible and asked if he really thought he could save everyone. Adjusting his glasses on his nose, the guy said with concern that the situation was much more serious than he thought. He asked what they should do, and Rachel asked what the question was and said, "First, they need to find who they are looking for." And so they began together, covering their mouths on one side, to loudly call out, one for the maid, one for the sister. Kevin reported that there were people bound and gagged here. They would be difficult to find. Rachel asked him if he was serious about whining, and he wiped his eyes and said he was scared. The girl asked, "He said that he wants to find his sister, so what is he afraid of?" The guy answered that he is worried because she is important to him. When suddenly the door opened sharply, and a question was heard about who was there. Rachel instantly accepted the magic, stunning the guard. The man jerked in fear and horror. A chill ran down his skin, and he said that he had scared him. The girl sat down and started looking for something in the men's pockets, and Kevin asked what she was looking for. The answer was the keys to the cage. But as soon as she found them, a huge sound came from behind the door about uninvited guests. She sighed heavily. And she told her friend that she would take care of them, and he should concentrate on finding Betsy and his sister and handed over the keys. O asked how he would know who her maid was. Rachel said from memory that she was a nice girl with brown hair and blue eyes. The guy looked at his companion in horror and asked how he could find her, knowing only this. The red-haired marquise was already leaving the door, leaving the last ray of light, and told him to just use his wits. Then 2 people ran up to her and asked if the prisoners had escaped, and another asked why she was walking around there. But then the red-haired girl with green eyes, instead of answering, extended her hand towards them in a position that was not the most natural or expected. The guys looked at her in surprise, but the next moment, under the influence of blood magic, they turned into stone statues. A man with white hair came up behind them and said that it looked like she could use magic. Raising her eyebrows and tilting her head forward so that she had to look up, she asked who he was. There was some kind of pressure. A chill ran through her body. She frowned, and her gaze became alert. Rachel felt that this was no ordinary man, that he was definitely a wizard. He came closer, and stopping, he asked what organization she was from. Rachel asked what he was talking about and explained that she was only here for the lost maid. The guy, amazed by such an answer, grinned and said that she was quite brave. He informed her that the auction would soon begin and told her to choose between dying by his hand or being sold at it. Tilting her head to the side, the little girl asked if there was an option where he dies by her hand. The man looked at her suspiciously with the one eye that was not covered by his hair. The girl said that if there was no such option, she would create a neg and directed a stream of magic at him. But the man defended himself. Focusing on the fact that she needed to defeat or kill the guy, she began to create the spell again. The platinum-haired boy said emotionlessly that she was very good for a child and also prepared a spell. However, he struck faster than her, and seeing this, Rachel took a frightened step back. In the same tone, but with a hint of pride, he said that she was not his equal and struck again, but the girl managed to block it. But even with this alignment of forces, she did not have enough, and under the pressure of the senior magician, she flew into the wall behind. After the blow, she fell to her knee and put her hand on her aching shoulder, realizing that it was dislocated. Coming closer, the white-haired magician asked where her courage had gone. She replied that it was hard for her. However, she thought to herself that if she were to face him head-on, she would definitely lose in strength. And the longer this drags on, the less profitable it will be for her. And she struck again, wrinkling her face from the pain in her shoulder. Responding to the blow, the guy asked if she didn't understand that she couldn't resist him. But in that case, she needed to find a loophole, and right now was the most necessary moment. She directed all the power of her magic to the side and ricocheted through the wall, revealing a view of the auction. Through the hole, the screams of men and the shrieks of women were immediately heard. Everyone was shouting that they needed to get out quickly. The man looked on in shock as the auction hall gradually emptied out behind a layer of dust, not expecting such a turn of events. Having come to his senses, he finally turned to the girl who had arranged all this and clenched his fist in anger. In turn, Rachel had already stood up and, shaking off the dirt, smiling, asked what they should do now and stated that the auction was now in complete disarray.